The young man suddenly opened his eyes, a terrible suspicion pierced him. He found himself on his knees on the floor, shirtless, clutching his head with his hands, and wondered if this was reincarnation. Visions of a magical sword and a powerful sphere flashed through his mind, and thinking about his favorite game, he decided to find the answer. This was a world he knew down to the smallest detail, a fantasy of swords, magic, and romance. He was reborn in his favorite game Dungeon Brave Soul, and here, in front of the Great Academy, his new life was about to begin. It was April 5th, the 101st Slayer year, and crowds of new students gathered in front of the academy. The day of the entrance ceremony had come. However, this entire world fit on a screen. In another reality, the young man with headphones clenched his fist in excitement, ready for his 40-second playthrough. While on the screen the game characters chatted, one of them confessed she was afraid of the exam results. He drank, completely absorbed. No matter how many times he played it, he never got tired of it. This game, Dambear, was the only reason that allowed him to endure the burden of a gloomy job. Not like in ordinary RPGs, here you could get close to the heroines and become their lovers, because of which the game's main character often got confused and ended up in their company. The game reached a decisive moment. In the grand hall, the instructor stepped forward to announce the best on the entrance exam, and the students, holding their breath, watched attentively. He leaned closer to the screen, his heart pounding with anticipation of the party that he knew was about to start. Among snacks and empty cans in his cluttered room, he knew this announcement would introduce the four main people of this story. And then the first two appeared on the screen: Shell Uranus 5th place on the exam, a mage, and Nagisa Sikai 4th place, a swordsman. The introductory part of the game continues and introduces us to another heroine, Aerith Centria, who took 3rd place on the entrance exam and begins her path as a priestess. Following her is the game's main character, Leon Praise. He is the best student in his class, a true swordmage and descendant of a legendary hero. At the center of the plot, you lead Leon, build relationships with the heroines, and eventually confront the Demon King. And beyond this main storyline, the world is filled with numerous side quests and events. Although most are known, rumors circulate about yet undiscovered secrets, so exploration becomes a key part of the adventure. The enchanted gamer admires the incredible beauty of the graphics and how the heroine's appearance changes as the plot develops, but he knows the real reason for the game's insane popularity is quite different. The thing is, the game was labeled as adults only. He smiles, the controller rattles in his hands, and he realizes that the game allows the player to create hair. However, the romantic elements in the game are not always too vivid. The process of getting closer to the heroines is often shown in such a way that the heart simply melts. The extremely successful game was adapted into anime, manga, and other merchandise. Even a For Everyone version was released with explicit content cut out, and players went crazy over the perfect balance of serious role-playing mechanics and romantic, adult themes. Returning to his room, surrounded by cans of energy drinks and merchandise, the gamer grimaced in pain. He hadn't slept for too long, but the fatigue temporarily recedes when he excitedly waves at the shelves, filled with figurines, and proudly declares that, of course, all this is his. But his energy fades as quickly as it appeared. He collapses onto the table, staring blankly at the game, and thinks with regret that no matter how hard he tries, he has never reached this part of the story before fatigue overwhelms him. He sprawled on a pillow on the floor, his head and shoulders hidden under a low table cluttered with remnants from the gaming session. Completely exhausted, he closed his eyes and decided to just sleep a little. A dark-haired young man in a long flowing cloak stands before an elegant building, hands in pockets. Disdain is heard in his voice as he asks, "Which game do you not like?" An exciting story about Dungeon Brave Soul 2 begins in the sequel. The character who was nameless in the first part, Xenon, becomes the new hero, and the events unfold after Leon has already sealed the Demon King. He continues. The player takes on the role of this new character, Xenon. In the game's plot, Xenon approaches Leon and the heroines, becomes an annoying friend, and joins them in a party. But gradually, everything changes. The heroines begin to distance themselves from Leon, and he becomes increasingly lonely. The reason they left becomes horribly obvious. Xenon systematically kidnapped the heroines. He sits with a cruel, triumphant smile on a pile of defeated young women. As a result, Leon ends up completely alone, cornered and forced to watch as Xenon, with a predatory smile, rapes one of the heroines. He showed a terrible sight, his face distorted with shock, and the young woman screamed in pain. The hero completely loses self-control. He screams hoarsely, desperately begging for the torment to stop. His desperate plea goes unanswered. Leon reaches out his hand, tears rolling down his face, but a new, desperate determination ignites in his eyes, and dark energy begins to swirl around him. Driven to complete despair, he tears off the Demon King's seal. The great chains are broken. Leon himself walks into the gaping maw of the dark sky. The consequence of this last desperate act is irreversible. the world disappears in a dazzling, catastrophic explosion. Here is the end of this story, a heartbreaking tale of love and adventure turned into a dark and grotesque game, and that is why the young man also despises Den Beret and vows never to have anything to do with it again. His passionate thoughts fade, he feels a new sensation. His hand reaches out to touch a cool or surface with a neat pattern. He opens his eyes, confused and not understanding where he is. This is not his room. Looking down, he freezes. Before him is a slender, muscular torso that does not belong to him. His gaze darts around, and his confusion only grows. Before him is an incredibly luxurious and spacious room, one he has never seen before. He approaches a large gilded mirror on the far wall. His reflection slowly emerges. As the image becomes clearer, he suddenly freezes. He is shocked by the face looking back at him. His mind struggles to comprehend what he sees. He cannot believe his eyes and does not recognize the penetrating dark-haired man in the mirror. Terrible truth overwhelms him. He grabs his head and screams the name of the person he hates most in Dambor Zenon Baskerville. He falls to his knees, shirtless and drenched in sweat, his hands clawing at his hair, and the world around him seems to crack. One desperate question screams in his head, what is happening? The terrible truth settles on him, cold and undeniable certainty. Now this is the story of a man who reincarnated not as a hero, but as the very villain he despised in his favorite game. His new life has begun, and what will happen to him is a dreadful unknown. The young man woke up with a frightened gasp, sweat running down his forehead. He froze before the luxurious mirror, hands pressed to the glass, and he was struck by a terrible truth. In the mirror stared the face of Zenon Baskerville, the main character of the game Dungeon Brave Soul 2, the person he hated above all in that world. He sighed, and suddenly his thoughts returned to his previous life, a gamer in a cluttered room, gamepad and headphones thrown aside because he decided to take a short nap, and he grabs his head in disbelief, asking himself why, of all possible options, he was destined to reincarnate as this man. He recalls that Zenon was called a man who hunts women, a villain of the highest order, and wonders what terrible deeds he must have committed in his past life to be cursed with such a reincarnation. Drowning in despair, he mourns his fate. If he had to be reborn, he would infinitely prefer to become the true main hero of this story, Leon, who is always surrounded by loyal comrades. His thoughts are interrupted by the sound of an opening door. A young maid enters the room carrying fresh linen. Seeing that he has woken up, she freezes and immediately apologizes for entering without permission, and he looks at her and demands to know who she is. This deeply affected Bose, her voice trembling as she explained. She insists that she knocked, but when he did not wake up, she had no choice but to enter, and she begs him to forgive her rudeness and untidy appearance, saying she will accept any punishment. He recoiled in complete shock. The thought that he could be punished for such a trifle was completely foreign to him, and its frightened submission was deeply shaken. The poor maid turned around and showed her back, saying she was ready for the usual punishment. The barely noticeable scars on her skin made him shudder, and with growing horror, he realized that the real Zenon probably abused her daily. An internal struggle raged within him. A dark impulse, probably a remnant of Zenon's nature, wanted him to hit her, but he suppressed it, said he would not punish her, and ordered her to dress, adding a threat to sound convincing. The usual Zenon would have hit her at least 10 times for that, and not make him repeat himself, so the worried maid quickly agreed. While the maid waited outside, he grabbed a dark shirt and noticed. Zenon's clothing was almost entirely black, just the wardrobe that suits a villain, which he had now become. He stood in the luxurious bedroom and watched the maid. Her beauty struck him an unexpected detail for someone he considered only a minor character while trying to navigate this new reality. He asked her what year, month, and day it was now. She nervously replied that according to the Slayer calendar, April 5, year 101, this date confirmed his fears and suspicions. This was undoubtedly the world of Dambor. This date had special significance for him, April 5, the day of the entrance ceremony to the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic in the capital. For him, a player who had completed the game, it was an unforgettable day. With this thought, he decided to go to the academy immediately, but the maid interrupted him, asking if he would skip the morning training, and this question completely caught him off guard. He froze, doubting her assumption. She explained that he trained every morning without exception, always at the same time. This revelation stunned him. He had no idea that the original Zenon had such a hardworking side. This was a character trait completely absent in the game. Noticing his hesitation, she offered to prepare breakfast if he wanted to take a break, but he decided not to break the habit and said he would train as usual and asked her to accompany him to the training ground. She led him through the estate until they found themselves in an abandoned, ruined courtyard. He froze, looking at the collapsed columns and weed-covered stones, not believing that this could really be Zenon's training ground. He grabbed a sword from the rack nearby. Its weight, strangely familiar, settled in his hand, and when he gripped the hilt, he was enveloped by a feeling of deep connection. He was gradually getting used to Zenon's body, and the movements seemed so natural, as if they had been his from birth. His gaze fell on a row of battered training posts. Although he knew little about martial arts, he understood. The strength of his body was the result of relentless work, not just natural talent. Focusing his will, he summoned a vortex of dark energy in his palm and called forth a dark blade. From his palm burst a blade of pure darkness, striking the target with destructive force. The post instantly shattered in an explosion of shadow and wood fragments. Yet he was still tormented by contradiction. The first Zenon was a hardworking man who mastered advanced dark magic, but at the same time, he was known as one who stole other men's women. Why remained a mystery, but he knew. As long as he lived in this body, he needed to understand who the real Zenon was. And then it dawned on him. The only reason he did not like Zenon was his reputation as a womanizer. But now, in this branch of time, it was the day of the entrance ceremony to the school, before the events of the first game, and Zenon had not yet seduced anyone, so at this moment there was no reason not to like him. New perspective opened before him, a whole sea of possibilities. He could lead a peaceful school life, avoid the romantic entanglements of the second game, and depending on his actions, help the hero kill the Demon King or simply stay away from danger. His daydreaming was interrupted by a maid with a basin of water, and he quickly apologized, acknowledging that this was her home. Simple words of thanks made the servant freeze in place. The basin quietly clattered. He asked why she seemed like a stone, and Leviana was shocked inside. She could not believe that Zenon himself was thanking her, and barely held herself together to not lose composure. He looked her straight in the eyes and confessed that he had always been grateful for her devotion, but until now was ashamed to express it. Leviana just stared back, completely speechless. Her heart pounded as he continued speaking, promising to truly appreciate her from now on, because he was glad for her support, and while she swallowed his words, he quietly vowed to himself not to become a villain like that Zenon, better to change his heart now while he still could. Leviana could not withstand such kindness. Tears of pure joy rolled down her cheeks. She exclaimed that this was the best day of her life and that her devotion was finally rewarded. He, surprised by her strong reaction, admitted it was his fault for not thanking her earlier and promised to rely on her from now on, and she tearfully agreed willingly. After the emotional exchange of feelings, he prepared to depart in a decorated carriage. Levina waved goodbye to him, tearfully begging him to take care of himself. When he settled inside, he thought that the first Zenon must have been so cruel every day that a simple thank you could provoke such a powerful reaction. Her cries echoed after the carriage as it drove away. She shouted for the young master to return alive and unharmed. He looked out the window with slight irritation and muttered for her to go away already. But when he was finally alone in the moving carriage, he sighed, leaned forward, clasped his hands, and focused on the most important question. How far should he go, following the original game's script? My heart trembled when I looked at the original chronology of the story. The main hero, Leon Brave, was supposed to spend 2 years to defeat the Demon King with the help of the heroines, and this Grantel was to begin today with the school entrance ceremony. Considering his feelings, he knew he would not follow that path. He sincerely believed in pure love and would not allow the hero to be betrayed, let alone steal someone else's love. This raised a key question. Being only a classmate, how much could he interfere in the main event? He recalled the grim ending of the sequel Dambore 2. In that timeline, Leon successfully sealed the Demon King, but Zenon kidnapped a heroine. This betrayal pushed the hero into despair to resurrect the very evil he wanted to destroy. The consequence of that resurrection was a catastrophe. The Demon King's magic burst out, wiped the royal capital off the face of the earth, and destroyed everyone in it. It was truly a terrible, devastating end. He concluded, if it is Zenon's antics that trigger all this, then the solution is incredibly simple: stop kidnapping heroines, stay aside, and wait for Leon to defeat the Demon King, completely ignoring the plot for his character. Having decided finally, an unshakable determination froze on his face. He would not follow Zenon's path. The choice was made. He would forge a completely different fate than the one imposed by the game. Under the decorated arch with the inscription, Royal Academy of Sword Magic, a new class of students ascends the stairs, their figures looking tiny against the grandeur that awaits ahead. Among them, a young man trembles with barely restrained excitement. He understands that he has finally reached the academy where the game Brave's soul took place. Determination flickers in his eyes. He gathers himself and prepares to enter. The academy grounds captivate at first glance. A huge campus with luxurious architecture around a majestic domed hall, and the main square is filled with crowds of students, a sea of new faces ready to begin their journey. Walking among them, a blush appeared on his face. He scolds himself for being nervous, considering it pathetic for someone like him who has already walked those same school corridors many times in the game. He covered his face with his hand to compose himself. he manages to calm down, but it exhausts him, and his brief moment of peace is shattered by a sharp step nearby. He flinches as a girl passes by. His thoughts instantly rush to the future, the entrance ceremony, orientation, and then that same legendary evening where the hero Leon is to meet the heroines. From this thought, a sinister chuckle escaped him, causing several girls nearby to scream in fright, and he froze, horrified to realize they were afraid of him. His face twisted into a wide maniacal smile, an expression as if he did not notice it, and when he turns around, two more female students notice him and jump back, their faces whitening with horror. The frightened girls hurriedly step away. One confesses to the other that it is her fault, and the young man watches them leave and goes alone, deciding for himself that from now on he will not laugh in public. Peter sat alone in the huge hall and felt a sudden stab of loneliness, but quickly brushed it off, reminding himself who he was: Zenon Baskerville, a cruel villainous character. He laughed at this thought and firmly assured himself that he was not lonely, even when completely alone. His gloomy thoughts were interrupted by a voice from the stage. A stooped official announced that it was time to name the best students of the entrance exam, and Zenon sharply raised his head, his attention instantly captured. He watched as the best entrance exam scores began to be announced. The director's voice named the student who took 5th place, Shell Uranus, and she quietly stood from her seat, modestly accepting this honor. She's the daughter of a local nobleman from the borderlands and Leon's childhood friend. It was Shell who pushed him to enter this academy, and at first she acts as a mage, a rear fighter specializing in offensive magic. The announcements continued. 4th place went to Najsa Shikai, and Zenon's heart tightened when he recognized another important figure described as lively, inquisitive, and energetic. She hails from an eastern country with Japanese culture, the daughter of a dojo master in swordsmanship, a true samurai. Her initial class is swordsman. She wields a katana with a speed surpassing even Leon. Zenon recalled that darkness hides in her heart, and the key to her story is to help her speak this darkness. Next was the one who took 3rd place, Aerith Centria, born into central nobility, but her father is a criminal, which made her upbringing strange. At first she was a cleric because her parents ran the church, and Zenon could not help but admire her proportional figure and mentally called her the goddess of breasts. He remembered her fate in the game, a miserable victim, broken both in body and soul by Zenon himself. He decided such a future would no longer happen. At that moment, the director's voice thundered through the hall, announcing the Academy Prize winner. 2nd place, Zenon Baskerville. He felt dizzy. All the main heroines were so cute, and he felt an irresistible desire to start relationships with them. Nervous laughter escaped him as he tried to comprehend the situation. The director's voice cut him out of his dreams, sharp and authoritative. Zenon Baskerville shuddered and instantly turned back to the president. He raised his eyes and saw that all eyes in the hall were directed at him. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. As the realization hit him with full force, he missed his chance to stand up. Whispers exploded among the students. Everyone recognized the name Baskerville, that infamous, double, aristocratic family suspected of murdering the previous king and conspiring with the neighboring state. Panic rose in Zenon. This was the worst kind of attention one could attract. The director addressed him directly. Although your high exam scores are impressive, the Academy places aristocrats and commoners on the same level, and disrespect, even from a family of marquises, will not be tolerated here. He remained seated, and suddenly panic flashed through his mind. He realized he would miss the moment to stand up. His mind raced wildly with thoughts, weighing options. Standing up now would look pathetic, and any careless awkwardness could become a reason for mockery. With a challenging smile, he chose his path, apologized for the rudeness, and promised to take the director's advice into account, but deliberately refused to stand. At his audacious statement, all the students froze in stunning, absolute silence. Amid the silent crowd, the heroines watched intently and tensely as the confrontation unfolded. The director's knuckles whitened on the podium. He noticed Zenon's insolent tone, but confirmed he understood, and Zenon had no intention of changing his rebellious behavior. The outward audacity hit a storm inside. He panicked when he realized he had already apologized. Although he seemed like a villain, he was actually a good person. The director cleared his throat and, considering the festive atmosphere, decided not to raise the issue for now, but sternly warned, if there is no improvement in the future, there will be consequences, and Zenon could only stand and watch, stunned. While the ceremony continued, Zenon reproached himself for the unfortunate moment. He was still not used to his new name. Then the director announced the most successful student, the 1st place in the entrance exam, and the class monitor, Leon Brave, and only one student stood up. It was Leon Brave, the hero's son, born with the power that could seal the Demon King, the only main hero of the game everyone knew, and although he was a commoner, he studied the best and was adored by many heroines, and initially he was a rune knight, a rare class combining melee combat with magic. When he appeared, Zenon was struck. The main hero he had played countless times stood right before him, and he noticed Leon's stern look in his direction. wondering if it was a look of hatred, because he could not recall anything for which he could be hated. From his place, he watches as they ask Leon praise to give a greeting on behalf of the new students, and Leon calmly agrees. Leon begins the speech, and Xenon worries whether his early antics have offended the best student. Leon modestly says he was born a simple country boy and normally would never have had a chance to stand here, adds that it is a great honor for him to study at the prestigious Royal Academy of Sword and Magic, and sincerely thanks his guardians, who were like parents to him, as well as the teachers and senior students. He continues, saying he enrolled to become stronger and protect the country. Although the kingdom of Slayers is peaceful, that does not mean there is no evil here worthy of hatred, and with a determined look he vows to fight the evil that causes people to suffer in the crowd. Xenon listens indifferently. It does not impress him. He expected a more pompous statement about becoming a hero king. Leon's voice rang out with the last note of determination. He would fight this evil, even if its source was a classmate from the same school. His words caused a stir among the students. They began whispering, but the sharp shape of the comet made Xenon embarrassedly raise his eyes upward. The source of his embarrassment instantly became clear. Leon's sharp, hostile gaze was directed straight at him. Xenon froze and wondered why was he being shown such open hostility if they had not even done anything to each other yet. Others also noticed this unexpected targeting. Hypothesis began to form in his mind. In the original game, Xenon was only a side character, a simpleton from the group of targets, but now it seemed that the world's settings had changed. He suddenly became the main villain with a biography that never existed. Apparently, that was why Leon was already looking at him with such hostility, even though Xenon had done nothing to deserve it. If that was the case, the future became frighteningly uncertain. Leon could lose to the Demon King, the world would perish, and there was no longer any guarantee that the hero would win according to plan and get a happy ending. Meanwhile, the ceremony at the academy ended. The students were called to their classes. Amid the crowd, Xenon sat alone, arms crossed, with an inscrutable, detached look. He understood, in this new reality, everything could be different and knowledge from the game might prove useless. His initial plan was simple: to do nothing and just survive, but now it became clear that he had to act. He decided with all his might not to provoke Leon, not to stand in his way, and to lead a peaceful school life. His determination was instantly questioned. From the opposite end of the classroom, Leon cast a look at him full of open contempt. Xenon felt this piercing gaze and thought as if Leon was already accusing him of some offense. He sought a more reliable way to survive, to join Leon and the others, help defeat the Demon Lord. After all, Xenon was considered the strongest after the Demon Lord himself and Leon, and by ensuring their victory, he could live peacefully at school and not let the world perish. He knew well that staying true to the main plot would be difficult. He would have to constantly fight for the sincere Xenon, especially when there was a certain teacher who pushed him towards darker inclinations. He swore not to allow this, but one important question remained. Why did the original Xenon himself behave this way from the very beginning? The lessons ended. Leon and friends arranged a meeting and discussed which clubs to check out. Xenon passed by them indifferently. He said that first impressions, formed in seconds, seemed to determine everything. Because of his appearance and the infamous reputation of the Tyrant family, his place in society was already decided. He shrugged off the thought and hurried home to plan the next steps. A luxurious carriage awaited him near the academy. Soon he arrived at the magnificent estate, where he was greeted at the doorstep with a solemn welcome. "Welcome back, young masters and me." Inside, the maid with 2 hair buns flinched when his hand reached for her face. He, confused, asked how long she had been waiting there, and if she was cold. She assured him that everything was fine and urgently informed him. His master was waiting for him in the office and asked him to appear immediately. He stood before the door, his thoughts racing. The name Grandolph Baskerville echoed in his head. Nearby, a voice hesitantly asked if he was the young master. Memories of the Lord of the Game overwhelmed him. Grandolph, his father, was the ruler of the Night Kingdom, the very one who turned Xenon to the path of evil. He was the leader of the underground world, head of a criminal guild, a ruthless slave trader and shadow assassin who drowned everything in darkness, and all information painted the image of a thief without equal. Resigned to the inevitable, he walked through the hall that resembled a glade. He knew he could not avoid his father, no matter how much he wanted to. Reaching the grand doors, he knocked and loudly said that he was here. As soon as he stepped inside, a surge of dark energy burst out, and a powerful spell, the bloody chain, shot forward and fiercely grabbed him. Magic slammed into the floor, and he ended up a tangled heap of bound limbs and helpless on an exquisite carpet, while a figure loomed over him. He groaned in pain, tensed in the chains, and raised his eyes when a large man hidden in the shadows coldly said that much time had passed. Through the pain, Xenon recognized his father. Grandolph Baskerville loomed over him and explained that the dark magic, the bloody chain, not only restrains, but also occasionally wounds, a true instrument of torture, and then Grandolph casually mentioned that Xenon took second place in the entrance exam. With sudden, brutal stomping, Grandolph pressed him to the floor and loudly expressed his deep disappointment that Xenon could not even secure first place in a small academy, questioning whether he was really his eldest son. He growled that the basketball family was a lineage of the strong who ruled at night, and someone had to be the strongest, accusing his son of selling the family pride and calling him a fool who would not be allowed to suffer any defeat. Randolph sneered with contempt, called Xenon a pathetic son for not being able to do anything against such a trifle, then issued an ultimatum. If Xenon does not take first place in the next exam, it will not end there, announced that he was leaving on business, and ordered to obey the stewards and not neglect training. After the father's departure, Xenon, beaten and bloodied, stumbled out of the room, and two maids rushed to him in horror. One screamed his name, the other begged him to hold on and promised to start treatment immediately. He lay in bed, the maid was treating the wounds from the father's attack, and when she carefully applied the potion, he saw with surprise that the terrible injuries on his body had already begun to disappear, while outside the majestic mansion stood quietly under the night sky. Looking down, he saw that Leviana's maid, completely exhausted from trying to save her, had fallen asleep on his chest. He watched her sleep, and a storm of thoughts raged in his heart. He could not believe that someone was capable of such cruel abuse of their own son. The very memory was unbearably painful. He wondered why such a good person as she was wasted, forced to serve a vile degenerate like that same Xenon, a man who steals lovers from others. His attention narrowed to the real reason. He knew without any doubt that Anon had gone mad and abandoned all righteous paths because of one man, Grandolph Baskerville. The realization triggered a flood of memories for Xenon. Daily torment accumulated, became an unbearable burden, and eventually shattered his mind. This breakdown directly led to the cruel framing of the hero Leon and, in a sense, took away the hero himself from him. The memories painted a sharp contrast. Leon, the hero whom everyone glorified, had everything that Xenon lacked. He came from a noble family, was loved by many girls, and was first in class. While Xenon was born into a closed and cruel family, other students only showed him contempt. He was abused without his father's love, and this ignited fierce envy and hatred toward Leon, who had everything he so desperately desired. And that is why, in his madness, Xenon tried to destroy Leon by taking away all the heroines who adored him. Returning to the present, he felt the weight of inherited past fall upon him. His face hardened, his hand clenched into a tight fist, and he decided to set a goal for himself in this world. His new goal was clear. There was someone who needed to be defeated even before the Demon King. Now he had an unbreakable goal to defeat Grandolph. He swore that this man was an implacable enemy who must not be allowed to exist. He clenches his fist, a new fire ignites in his eyes. Reborn, he decides to live freely and enjoy this world, rejecting both the game creator's script and the will of his tyrannical father. His moment of tense determination is suddenly interrupted. Leviana's maid rushes into the room, trips, and falls right onto him as he lies in bed. Embarrassed, she exclaims, "Young master." She lands on him, gripping tightly from surprise. He freezes with wide-open eyes and blushes from the sudden, unexpected embrace. She finally realizes where they are and lets out a panicked scream. This small burst of chaos unfolds in a room of the vast and formidable Baskerville estate, silently towering under the starry night sky. A little later, when the commotion subsides, he sits at the writing desk in his room. Bathing in the morning light, he writes intently and begins to make a plan. His primary goal is to confirm knowledge of the game. With a pen, he carefully writes down quests and locations, recording everything in Japanese characters. He imagines future plot twists and looks for ways to get what he needs. He reasons that writing in Japanese is a necessary step so that no one in this world can decipher his strategies. Having finished the notes, he pushes them aside and exhales with satisfaction. The current task to note everything down is complete, but now he must face a much bigger question: how to live in this world. His thoughts instantly return to the main obstacle in his path. To achieve anything, he knows he must have one person underfoot, and that person is his father. He even imagines simply running away from home, but immediately rejects the idea. It is impossible. His father will surely send assassins after him, and if he strays too far from the original script, he will not be able to predict the actions of the hero Leon he has trapped. He considered the best option, hoping that the Demon Lord would be sealed as history foretold, but the grim reality overshadowed this hope, and his face tightened with anxiety. Everything was at stake. If Leon loses to the Demon Lord, the whole world will burn in flames and ruins. Lying awake in a luxurious bed, Xenon Baskerville thoughtfully contemplates his new reality. He knows, to become stronger, he needs to acquire and develop skills. With quiet determination, he issues the command to check his status. In response, in the darkened room before him, suddenly materialized a holographic display confirming his identity: Xenon basketball and profession, magical swordsman, fencing skill indicated as 20. He carefully studies the data and realizes his profession here is the same as in the game Magical Swordsman, like Leon, and he confirms his understanding of the Dambear world. There are no levels. Power is given only through acquiring skills and upgrading them. He casually ran his eyes over the list of his skills: Sword Mastery 20, Dark Magic 20, Training 20. A shadow of surprise flashed across his face. He continues to look at the numbers. Why Sword Mastery and Dark Magic have the same values that is clear to him, but how his training skill could have increased unclear, and he is gripped by anxiety. He only hopes he won't have to use it. He ran his finger along the edge of the display, noting its strict limitations. This is not a game status screen at all. There are no commands for items, settings, saving, or low. This realization hardened his resolve to become stronger. He needs to learn new skills and improve mastery of them. The maximum for combat skills is 50, so there is still much room for growth ahead. He also understands that raising skills to a certain level will unlock higher-level classes, and he needs to acquire items, many of which he has already decided to obtain. These items provide a bias towards strength. Sturdy weapons and armor increase his base stats, and certain things unlock entirely new abilities in magic. He also considers accessories and talismans that reduce damage, and understands there are things he definitely needs to acquire. He estimates how to obtain them. Items can be bought in shops, but they are also found in dungeons or earned as rewards for certain events. Getting out of bed, he was struck by one last sober thought. Dungeon items depend on luck and are unreliable to obtain, and true rarities are only bought at auctions, and for that, crazy money is needed. He stood by the window and gazed into his new reality. Having no intention to strictly follow the original game scenario, he clearly understood that he must not interfere with Leon, because event items are for the main hero, and if he foolishly takes something that causes Leon to lose to the Demon King, the game will end for everyone. While he pondered this fragile balance, a polite knock sounded at the door of his huge, ornate bedchamber, and a voice from the corridor asked permission to enter. The door opened. A maid stood in the doorway with a tray and his breakfast. She explained that she thought he was unwell, so she brought the food directly to the room. Xenon confessed with relief that he was already hungry. He instantly understood the properties of the dish. The sandwich and soup had a healing effect, and the coffee removed status effects. This was Dishy knew as Levi in his command key. She noticed that it looked appetizing, and the maid was flustered by the compliment, saying that she hadn't done anything special and was just doing her duties. Despite her protest, Xenon looked at her warmly and thanked her again, as always. Simple words of thanks turned out to be too strong for her. While Xenon calmly sipped his coffee, the maid, overwhelmed with emotions, covered her flushed face with her hands, and a drop of blood fell from her nose. The surge of strong emotions caused a sudden nosebleed that splattered on the polished floor. Embarrassed, the maid hurriedly apologized and fled the room, promising to return for the dishes later, leaving the stunned man standing and looking at the traces of her excessive reaction. He sat down to eat again, amazed and smiling. He couldn't understand how a simple thank you caused such a strong reaction, but the depth of the maid's adoration turned out to be something he truly liked. Later, in a formal suit, Xenon walked through the grand halls of the estate, where he was met by the old head butler, who politely said, "Good morning," and Xenon mentally knew that the character in this world already had reliable allies, so all the desperate acts of the original, for example, taking someone else's woman, were completely unnecessary. He addressed the butler named Zeus and straightforwardly asked if he was going to report to his father about his missing the morning training. Zeus, as the senior butler who runs the estate, answered directly. He wasn't there to report. He was just worried that Xenon might be sick. The butler continued, speaking seriously while looking down from the top of the stairs. He said that Xenon's father, the Lord, has great expectations of him. He wants his son to grow into a strong person worthy of the name of their basketball family. Zeus finished, sincerely hoping that Xenon would not betray this trust. He assures the butler that although he will sometimes take breaks from training, in the end he will meet his father's expectations. His expression is determined, but a hint of defiance can be seen in his eyes. He turns to leave and tells Zeus that mere swings won't make him strong. With a confident smile, he declares that he will become powerful in his own way to surprise his father, and announces his departure. A week passes at the academy. Xenon's lonely lifestyle remains unchanged. His threatening figure makes others whisper. The program at the middle school level is trivial for him because the principles of magic come easily to him, and from the other end of the classroom, Leon Price watches him with a gaze full of open hostility. In the lecture hall, the teacher announced that today's lesson was dungeon exploration, and a sinister smile blossomed on Xenon's face because this was the lesson he had been waiting for, and his eerie excitement made the students nearby recoil in fear. She explains that dungeons are layers of monsters in abundance, like mountains of treasure that continuously provide resources, but at the same time, they are a real-time bomb. If left unattended, they will endlessly spawn monsters, so the teacher orders everyone to form teams before going out. The academy where they study was created specifically to exterminate monsters hiding in these dungeons, and its true purpose is to train people who can protect the lives of others. The students gather in front of the huge stone entrance training dungeon of the academy, known as Sage's Playground. The teacher announces that now each team will enter in turn. Xenon stands ready, sword in hand. The teacher, noticing that Xenon is alone, asked in surprise why he is not in a team. Xenon, placing his hands on his hips, confidently said that he needs no one and can handle the training dungeon on his own, and these words left the teacher momentarily speechless. While he holds his position, another voice interrupts. A young woman with a long dark ponytail steps forward and says that she also has no problems, and Xenon slightly turns his head to look at the newcomer. The young woman is Nagisa Sekai, known for initially not trusting others. The teacher, worried, warns them that solo expeditions are dangerous, especially in the first dungeon. Then she suggests that the two of them go together. She stood silently while Xenon brushed off the teacher's offer, saying that everything is fine and it is unnecessary. However, he thought strategically not to interfere with Leon and had to minimize any contact with Nagisa to the absolute minimum. Standing next to their teacher, she sternly addressed the class, explained that although there are no particularly dangerous monsters in this dungeon, any adventures or accidents are your own responsibility. In the unlikely event of death, the academy will not take any responsibility, so she begged them not to take risks and not to act recklessly. Finally, to motivate them, she said that their performances would affect their grades, and this immediately caused a wave of excitement among the crowd of students. The students immediately began to argue. Each group demanded to be let in first. Xenon, observing, disdainfully noted their impatient desire and thought that the teacher could simply decide the order herself. Standing aside from the crowd, Nagisa said that the others are so carefree, as if on a walk, and this remark caught Xenon by surprise. She noted that it is visible on his face that he is clearly problematic, and if others are scared, then nothing can be done. Then she asked what he wanted from her, because he looked like the only one without a team. Even before he could answer, she declared that if no one can decide who will go first, then I, Nagisa Sekai, will take the first move, and Xenon stood stunned, not believing whether she was trying to outdo everyone. Without uttering a word, she decisively walked past the quarrelsome students. Leon and the others shouted that her actions were unfair, and Xenon simply watched with a sly smile, considering her character strange and interesting. He calmly told her that he would leave it to her discretion. She alone entered the stone passage, facing the deep, ominous darkness of the dungeon. Behind her, the other students kept grumbling, calling her selfish, and Xenon, having reached the limit of his patience, exploded with rage and growled that their indecision was a futile waste of time, demanding that they decide by rock, paper, scissors, or lottery before sunset. His outburst had an effect. Leon Prey declared that it was now their turn, and the other students, though embarrassed, lined up behind him, while the teacher looked surprised and admitted to herself that she had begun to respect the unexpected leadership of Xenon Baskerville differently. She reconsidered her assessment. She realized that the student's detachment from Xenon was most likely due to his frightening appearance and influential surname, a prejudice that she admitted, also felt. As their teacher, she felt the need to seriously reflect on her own bias. Leon suspiciously asked why Xenon decided to go last when he wasn't even playing rock, paper, scissors with them to determine the order. Xenon narrowed his eyes and coldly replied that he needed to check one minor detail in the arrangement. He turned to the teacher and bluntly asked, "Is there any tax on items and treasures found in Dungeon B?" She explained that since this was a lesson under the school's control, there would be no taxes, but warned that the found items were almost worthless, and although there were no strong monsters in the dungeon, he should retreat if it became dangerous, especially since he was alone, and a wide smile blossomed on Xenon's face as he sighed with relief and promised to search carefully for items. With a final dismissive wave of his hand, he thanked her for her concern and walked away. She watched his back, thinking that she had been a reliable and kind teacher because she cared so much about him. But as soon as he moved on, a dark memory from the game surfaced in Xenon's mind, a vision of the same teacher, defeated and chained in the basement. He clenched his fist with grim determination and vowed to himself that he would never allow that world to become reality. Determination hardened within him. He stood before the gaping maw of the dungeon, ready to face whatever awaited inside. In the stone dungeon, Xenon launches an attack. With a single wrist movement, he summons the Shadow Edge, a cloud of dark, blade-like projectiles rushing forward, while gelatinous slime creatures bounce and explode against the floor and walls. Darts fly through the long cave-like hall, and one sword swing clears the path of all enemies. He freezes and thoughtfully touches his chin, recognizing the dungeon map and items dropped by defeated slimes, for example, a slime core, and realizes everything is exactly like in the game. Everything falls into place, his suspicions are confirmed. This is just a training zone, filled only with weak enemies and no traps, so it can be easily cleared even at a low level. With this understanding, he moves with new confidence, dealing with the remaining slimes with disdainful ease. He considers all this an easy task, picking up another fallen item, his thoughts turning to the real problem, the terrible monster waiting on the lower floor. Thoughts of the upcoming threat do not distract him from the present. Before him is a room teeming with another horde of slimes. He snorts disdainfully trivialities and jumps right into their crowd. He lands among them with a contemptuous smile, sword raised high. He mocks the creatures sparkling with energy around him, declaring that they are nothing more than punching bags. The creatures around him rush in a crowd, and he only breathes heavily, sweat dripping from his chin, a satisfied smile playing on his face, and they are destroyed. The moment the chaos subsides, the room is cleared, thin trails of energy dissolve in the air. He stands alone at the top of the majestic stairs and decides that it is time to ascend to the next level. Supported by Leon and Shell, he sits wounded near a stone wall. Leon asks if he is hurt, but Xenon can only think about his miserable performance even against weak monsters. In his first dungeon, he needed help. This memory from the third floor of that dungeon, where the number of casualties among students was steadily increasing, and only Leon, Shell, and Aegisa were skilled enough to reach the lower lake. He recalls how another student used a class skill to heal the wounded and ordered them to line up. Xenon snorted disdainfully to himself, believing that cooperating with such brainless allies would only drag him down. The girl's soothing magic flows effortlessly. Leon sincerely thanks her, noting that, as befits a sage, Aerith Century's mana seems boundless. Watching her, Xenon was overwhelmed by an unfamiliar feeling. His eyes widened from sudden, anxious vulnerability. He sharply slaps his own face, shooing away the thought. He realizes that if he looked for another minute, he would fall in love with her, and that would be a bad ending for the resurrection of the Demon King. He cannot afford to become a compromised hero, so with renewed determination, he decides to move on. But just as he is turning to leave, Aerith suddenly approaches him directly and asks if he is Baskerville. He acknowledges her in response, calls Cantry the third student of the academy. Other students look nervously with slight smiles, and she confirms her identity, addressing him as Junior. She offered to heal him, but he waved it off, saying it was unnecessary. He called the dungeon just a tutorial and asked what she was doing instead of advancing. Aerith looks at him gently and simply explains her actions. She heals everyone because she cannot leave the wounded alone. He could not take his thoughts off her. Aerith Cintria, the embodiment of devotion and self-sacrifice, a woman who would give her life for anyone. He recalled moments from the game when she did exactly that. Asked if she needed to go forward, but she just smiled and said she had a friend's permission, because for her it was more important that the whole team reach the goal together, and he really liked her sweet, friendly manner. Her behavior, of course, was admirable, but during the game she always filled him with anxiety. This type of person is one who sacrifices themselves and refuses their own happiness for the sake of others. He knew she was not bad, but her very nature irritated him. He immediately rejected this idea as absurd and left. He decided it was not his business to say anything. He left the reproaches to the hero. She called out, asking if something was wrong. Without fully turning around, he told her to continue helping others, but to do so moderately. Then he announced that he would go ahead. His determination hardened. Saving Aerith, the wounded saint, from her endless cycle of self-sacrifice was not his business. That was Leon's role. As the villain, all he had left was to leave dramatically. With this, he returned to the gaping maw of the lower levels of the dungeon. Pitch-dark stairs led down into the abyss. The descent brought him to the fourth floor, where a horde of horned hair-like beasts rushed through the darkness. He calmly wiped the blade, confident that none of his classmates could have come this far. He assumed that Leon, Seal, and Aegisa had most likely already reached the lowest floor. His thoughts flew to them. He imagined the party of heroes standing before a huge shadow beast. By now, he guessed that Leon had probably already defeated that monster. He stood amid a field of fallen small monsters and felt a bit dissatisfied after his first dungeon expedition, but his thoughts were cut off by a piercing scream echoing from the depths of the cave. This frightened scream belonged to another student who panicked past Nagisa's consciousness, wildly shouting for everyone to retreat and saying they would die if they did not move. Hearing the naked fear in his voice, Nagisa turned to this commotion. Her eyes widened as she saw a student running and another girl who had fallen to the ground and could not escape. Above them both loomed a huge shadow. It was a gargly, a terrible monster that should have dwelled only on the lowest dungeon level, but now stood before them with menacingly extended claws. The boy shouted in rage upon seeing his classmate. The gargoyle roared, declaring it would destroy all humans, and suddenly a blinding light flared. Leon's hero blood awakened, and he charged into battle alongside Nagisa and Shell to repel the beast, while from afar Xenon watched and recognized those fated moments. Suddenly he realized that his memory had failed him, had forgotten an important detail. The game briefly mentioned that the gargoyle had escaped from somewhere, killing several classmates during the escape, and below the hero's team was already engaging the monster in battle. In another corner of the cave, the terrible price of that escape became clear. A student pressed the body of a classmate to himself and sobbed, blaming himself had allowed the enemy to escape and thereby doomed his friend to death. His grief was instantly cut short when the gargoyle loomed over him. Xenon watched indifferently and decided that the minor character, doomed to die, was about to meet his fate, coldly choosing that it would be this very student. When the monster's claw descends and drowns out the student's screams, Xenon understands. This sacrifice is necessary, only then can Leon grow into a hero and stand against the demon race. This death is the needed push, and for a moment he wonders if helping would be a mistake. He looks at the two roads ahead and hesitates. If he intervenes, the future in which Leon defeats the Demon King and saves the world might change. Feeling the sadness of the situation, he decides he must ignore it. There is no other way out. While the students scream in horror, he turns away. He stood still, his fist clenched at his side, and behind him through the noise a desperate argument broke out. One begged the other to run and save himself, but the response was stubborn: "We will never abandon a friend or run away alone." Consequence of his hesitation erupted in a blinding flash, and two students, one firmly clutching the other, screamed as the gargoyle's power surged at them like a wave of inevitable death. But at the last moment, an explosion thundered before them. A figure stood between them and the beast, and the students only froze in stunned silence. The gargoyle howled, arcs of raw power spread across its body from the unexpected blow. Xenon glanced at the creature, his face twisted with irritation. He cursed his decision with bitter clarity. He realized he was simply unfit for the role of villain. Xenon Baskerville raises his hand and silences a classmate, declaring that a hero who cannot become stronger due to a rewritten script is not a true hero, and one who abandons comrades is just trash. He swears he will not let them die just for the sake of the script, and at that moment, a massive, horned gargoyle roars in fury, warning the man that he will not get away with it. He laughs maniacally at the creature's threat, mocks it, and asks what right an ordinary training boss has to bark at him as he lunges forward, dark energy swirling around his fists. In the air, he proudly proclaims himself the true great villain, one even the main hero cannot defeat, then contemptuously asks how some minor monster from the crowd dared to contradict him, and disdainfully advises it to just die for him. The Hergul punches the ground where it just shattered a stone. The beast growls in irritation, and Xenon delivers a glancing blow, noting to himself that his opponent is no pushover. With a grimace of irritation, he compares the creature to a motionless wooden doll and realizes the gargoyle has the same strength as monsters in the mid-game stage. He realizes, with his starting equipment, that rusty sword he cannot land a single effective hit, so he activates a skill, shouting Shadow Blade, and the magical strike hits the gargoyle's face, making it scream in pain. Thoughts race in his head. He analyzes the enemy. The gargoyle is physically strong but has low resistance to magic, so the only way out is to attack with magic. A grim expression appears on his face as he estimates how many dozens of magical attacks it will take to win. Enraged, the gargoyle roared, making it clear that it wanted to kill him. He pondered, in a real game, such an enemy should be defeated by a team, but unfortunately for him, he plays alone. He decided to finish everything at once with a critical strike. When the gargoyle lunged forward, Xenon struck the ground with his foot and confidently declared that he knew its weak spot. With a final upward thrust, he plunged his sword deep into the monster's chest. Here it is, he thought, hitting the exact weak point, and the gargoyle let out its last piercing scream as the sword pierced it. He remembered the main rule of this world. All enemies in Danbur have vulnerable spots, and a hit there is a critical hit, and for the gargoyle, it was right under the chin. He leaned toward the dying beast with a cruel smile and taunted it, asking what it was like to be killed by a weaker opponent, a humiliating end for a creature that had resorted to tormenting the weak and sought revenge for defeat by the hero. The gargoyle only let out a rough wheeze. Its life was fading. The gargoyle gave one last terrified scream as Xenon unleashed a devastating spell and roared its name, Hellfire Blast. A stream of black energy burst from the creature and completely engulfed it. It howled in pain as its stone body was torn apart and incinerated. He stood over the disintegrating remains, calmly sheathing his sword. He thought that the magic swordsman was the strongest starting class in this game, a stylish moment with Leon. Against such a weak starting boss, he knew losing was simply impossible. He examined the item cards that materialized after the victory over the monster and realized this was his first real victory since he arrived in this world. Although he did not know how the victory over the event monster would affect the plot, he was still happy after all. He saved a life that, according to the original game plot, was supposed to die. His thoughts calmed, and he turned his attention to the students who had fallen silent in the case. He approached them, raised his hand, and waved in a casual greeting, asking, "Are you all okay?" while a boy knelt, caring for his injured friend. The young man raised his eyes, a drop of sweat glistening on his forehead. His gaze fell on the empty potion bottles scattered on the ground, a harsh reminder that their supplies were completely exhausted. Seeing their predicament, Xenon handed over several elixirs and told the surprised student that he could use them since they clearly needed them. The student hesitated and asked if everything was all right after all. He had nothing to repay with. Xenon waved it off and said it was a trifle. The potion was cheap, don't worry. The student gratefully began to give the girl the potion. When the color returned to her face, Xenon smiled and said it was good that both survived. The girl, coming to her senses, looked up at her rescuer. She watched as her companion deeply bowed before Xenon Baskerville, resting his head on the rocky ground. He sincerely thanked not only for the healing drink, but also for saving their lives, and Xenon, standing over them, just waved it off and said it was not worth mentioning after all. They were classmates. The boy pondered the fight, not believing who could have predicted the appearance of such a powerful monster in this dungeon, and admitted that although he did not intend to lower his guard, everything happened quite unexpectedly. His thoughts instantly plunged into self-blame. He hit the ground with his fists and shouted that it was his fault as a leader that his friends died. If he had been stronger, they would not have had to endure such horror. Xenon interrupted him with a blank face and said that the monster was irregular, and even if they had lost, it would not have changed anything. He advised the upset boy, "If you really feel guilty, become stronger to protect your friends next time." Xenon thought to himself that such a strong sense of responsibility for a comrade's injury was too noble a trait to belong only to a background character. These words struck a chord. Tears appeared in the student's eyes. He agreed and decided to become stronger like Baskerville, but Xenon waved it off, telling him not to take him as an example, and advised that life at the academy was long, so just doing everything you can would be enough. But the student was not finished yet. He bowed his head again and insisted that he wanted to apologize, properly admitted that he had misunderstood Xenon and that he had already heard that Xenon was an irritable person, while Xenon just listened and responded neutrally and concisely. He explained his prejudice in detail. He had previously thought that Xenon was a much worse person because of his frightening face and the bad reputation of the basketball family, but now he admitted that Xenon turned out to be a good person. Xenon remained calm and replied, "Yes, I know that." Despite Xenon's brief reply, the student did not stop and bowed low again, telling how he and his classmates ignored him in class. Xenon could have left them, but instead risked to save them and even shared his valuable healing potions. Admitting that he was truly wrong, the student begged for forgiveness. His plea hung in the air. Xenon was not ready at all. A slight blush appeared on his cheeks, and he realized that, being a loner, this was the first time he had really spoken to a classmate so embarrassing that he did not know what to say. Overcoming the awkwardness, he waved off the apology, once again confirming that his face was scary and that basketball was an evil person, then handed over a small decorated item. He handed the item to the student, called it magic that repels monsters, and ordered him to use it so the boy could safely get out of the dungeon, explaining that he himself would go ahead. He explained that the item should be effective against weak monsters that could be encountered specifically in this dungeon. Filled with gratitude, the student promised to definitely repay this favor, realizing how much he owed him. Carelessly raising his thumb, he brushed off the student's promise and said to repay when he succeeded. Then he turned his back and went into the depths of the dungeon, where electrified wolf-like beasts were thrown. He descended to the lowest level of the dungeon, a place everyone called the platform for the wise. As soon as he stepped into the new chamber, he was immediately noticed Leon's victims standing nearby froze in shock and whispered the name Baskerville in disbelief. If you approached the group where Nagisa Sekai and Shell Uranus were, somewhat arrogantly, he asked if they were all right, noting that such vigilance could be expected from the descendant of a hero. His words struck at the very heart. Leon, with a dirty face, angrily asked how he could know they were in danger, and accusatorily said aloud whether Xenon himself was to blame. Calmly, Xenon brushed off the accusation. He said he did not know why Leon was so angry, but since a powerful monster had appeared earlier, he simply assumed they had encountered it too. The explanation shattered Leon's composure. He realized with horror that the same monster had attacked them, and the fact that they remained unharmed was called a miracle. The truth struck him like thunder. It was his fault he had let the monster go, and because of this, his classmates were injured, so he fell into despair. As guilt consumed him, Shell Uranus stepped forward to comfort him. She persistently assured him it was not his fault and that he had protected them, then tearfully explained, without him, both she and Nagisa could have died. He falls to his knees, tears on his face, pounding his fist on the stone floor and screaming in pain and despair. He is torn apart by the thought that if he had truly defeated the enemy, his classmates would not have been harmed. He He cries out about his helplessness, not understanding how he can be a descendant of a hero when he is so weak. His screams echo in the chamber, his companions react. Nagisa's consciousness watches him with a stern, unwavering gaze, and the gamer protagonist lowers his eyes to the scene. A shadow passes over his face, and he quietly utters Leon's name. He ran his hand through his hair. A thoughtful, almost calculated expression appeared on his face as he contemplated how the drama was unfolding. Meanwhile, Aerith and Nagisa Neal stood next to the confused Leon, trying to comfort him. This moment is a decisive turning point. In the original course of events, the enemy that Leon could not defeat would have killed a classmate, and the bitter remorse over that tragedy became the impetus for his sudden maturation. But the gamer protagonist raises his gaze and thoughtfully reflects on the discrepancy. He understands that due to changes in the timeline, the original ending is no longer obvious, doubts whether Leon will now achieve the same growth, and wonders what the hero will do in this altered situation. Filled with disappointment, Leon struck his fist on the stone floor. He cannot forgive himself for his own weakness. He sinks into despair, and Yurin tries to comfort him, saying not to blame himself. Nearby stands Nagisa's psyche and adds that if he had not been there, they both would have been in mortal danger, because he saved them despite his injuries. From afar, Xenon watches how this scene unfolds. He turns away, his decision made. There is no point in thinking about how Leon might grow after this. The only important thing is to do everything he can here and now. Starting to leave, he throws to Leon, "Be careful on the way back." Leon, now wearing glasses, asks if there is anything else, and Xenon simply addresses him by his surname Baskerville. He paused for a moment and threw to Leon, "If you have something to say it quickly." Leon bowed his head and quietly thanked him. Xenon, surprised, watches as Leon makes a deep, solemn bow. He explains that he is sincerely grateful that Xenon helped his wounded classmates and dealt with the consequences, acknowledging that it was a brave act on Xenon's part, but still remains thankful. He raises his head, a faint blush barely visible on his cheeks, but his gaze is steely. He says that a true hero must always do what is right, and immediately adds sternly, "Don't misunderstand me." He continues and resolutely swears that he will never forgive Xenon's evil, and that one day he will receive his deserved punishment. Xenon, without saying a word, turns and leaves, and Leon calls him by name, and at that very moment Nagisa appears at the bottom of the stairs. His scream is cut off when he sees her. Nagisa stands before him, sword in hand, and piercingly asks if he is the one who defeated the gargoyle. Leaning on his Xenon, she smiles faintly knowingly, as if asking, "Is that really what they say?" He stood aside. A palpable threat hovered around him, separating him from the rest of the class. Nagisa inside watched him. A confident smile played on her face. She had been right about him from the very beginning. Her eyes did not deceive her. She addressed him directly, saying that one day she wanted to challenge him to a duel, because for her, the clash of the mighty was simply a way to become even stronger. When she walked down the stone corridor, he irritably scratched the back of his head and muttered to himself that an annoying person had taken notice of him, and the road ahead would be difficult. Diving even deeper into the dungeon, he found himself in a huge, silent hall. At the far end, at the top of a short staircase, stood a single luxurious throne that barely shimmered. On the throne seat lay a small open box with several silver medals. He instantly understood everything. This meant that the dungeon was cleared. The mission called Arrival at the Sage's Platform was completed, the prize achievement medal. He picked up one of the medals and thought about how everything suddenly turned around. The gargoyle had driven him out, and he retreated in tears. It seemed that he had indeed passed the dungeon without forgetting the goal. For a devoted player, he thought, this was a defeat. Suddenly it occurred to him, did Leon and the others take their medals when they returned? He assumed that maybe they forgot, and from that he began to wonder what his own consolation prize might be. He moved along the wall of the chamber, running his hand over the stone blocks. A dull screech sounded when he pressed a certain spot, and a hidden opening revealed itself. Hearing this, his eyes widened in disbelief. The secret room was filled with piles of gold, armor, and weapons. He instantly recognized it, the Nuvarich room, a special reward that was not supposed to appear after the first dungeon clearing. Overflowing with excitement, he threw himself headfirst into the sparkling pile. Forgotten royal treasure filled the room from wall to wall, shiny coins, enchanted weapons, and sturdy armor all waiting to be cleaned. Digging through the treasures, his hands came upon a small decorated chest. He opened it and shouted triumphantly it was a magic bag. He admired his trophy with delight. It was the achievement room, a place where money and items he had accumulated during previous clearings were stored. The magic bag itself was a priceless artifact that could hold an unlimited number of valuable items. In excitement, he jumped into the air, laughing maniacally. With all this money and stuff, he instantly became a billionaire. He was making his way through the mountains of treasures, determined to stuff every last trifle into his new backpack. While he was working, a sudden, sharp sensation ran through him. He grabbed his chest as dark, crackling energy appeared around his arm. His gaze froze on one item among the pile, a magnificent blade shining with powerful light. It was the demonic sword Ama no Habakiri. He recognized it instantly. It was the weapon he had created during the game, poured a lot of money and materials into it, improving it again and again. It was the ultimate weapon, the holy sword Excalibur, available only in the second half of the scenario, and he could not comprehend whether this was really his favorite sword that had ended up here, in this world. He lifted the blade, its power pulsed in his hand. He recalled that if he mastered all the sword skills, it could deal unprecedented damage to the demon lord even on hard mode, and the very thought of wielding such a weapon was overwhelming. This pushed him to Starling's question: were all the items in this room really like that based on the data from his own playthroughs? Reflecting on this, his face turned to stone. If these transferred items were real, then during his double game the data had somehow materialized in this world. One terrifying question echoed in the darkness of his thoughts: who could have arranged this? He stood amid the treasures, the demon lying heavily in his hand, and he was tormented by the question of his existence. It was no coincidence, he was sure that someone's deliberate will had brought him to this world. But who? And for what purpose, he wondered. His mind raced again and again, replaying the conversation with Leon, and he could not understand why he became Xenon 2, not Leon 1. The reincarnation made no sense until the intention was understood, divine or demonic, so he needed to know the purpose for which he was sent here, and more importantly, how specific game data was transmitted along with him. Leaving the thought unresolved, he turned and walked through the stone arch. Behind him, Leon shouted his family name, Baskerville. A sudden call caught the attention of the teacher nearby. He looked aside with curiosity. She approached him, tossed a small, shiny metal object into the air, and said, "Here," catching it. He examined the thing and asked what it was. He held the metal. She clapped her hands with a bright smile, attracting the attention of the other students, and loudly declared, "With this, I claim the conquest of Zenon Baskerville of the Sage's Arena." He raised his head, stunned by the loud declaration. The other students whispered in shock, realizing it was a trial, and the teacher, expressing sympathy for his troubles, explained that since he had defeated the event boss, he could now explore other dungeons, but added a warning. The gargoyle appeared unexpectedly, so he should not overexert himself. Later, walking the city streets, he pondered his next steps. He knew he had to find companions. The items he found in the Hall of Achievements were powerful, but his current self could not equip them. First, he needed to raise his skill, because alone he could not achieve everything. His frustration grew. What was the point of discarding weaker weapons if they were needed to train skills? He clenched his fist and understood the harsh truth. Soloing high-level dungeons had a strict limit. The thought of conditions like poisoning, paralysis, or petrification finally cemented his conclusion. Without helpers who could assist, it would be a death sentence. Companions were indispensable. He sighed quietly. The realization fell on him with oppressive finality, but he was completely alone. He immediately began looking for options and mentally addressed the heroines from the original game, Dungeon Brave, but quickly dismissed the idea they were mercenaries who demanded payment for joining. Their only real value lay in abilities tied to unique items, and in trouble they were known for running away and thus unreliable. Looking at his classmates, for example the skilled Leon Praise, he realized that finding a truly useful partner among them was unlikely. A dark verdict descended on him. In this deadly situation, he understood he could not afford to be chosen. The question burned in his mind: does something like a continuation even exist in this world? When the stakes were so high, his thoughts turned to a darker option. He recalled that in the kingdom of Slayer there was a system of legal slavery. Those bought at auctions were bound by magic of subjugation, ensuring semi-permanent forced loyalty. He made a grim conclusion. Even if he had to resort to slavery, he needed to acquire a subordinate to survive, and there was no time to hesitate. Now his path became clear. He headed to the grand, tinted buildings of the slave auction, a place teeming with desire. The man in the top hat smiled, greeted the young master of the basketball family Xenon, and led him to the front row, saying it would be very useful. In the plush armchair with arms crossed, his thoughts were already on the goal: to sell slaves, gather loyal followers, and stand at the very top of the underworld. This was the path he had to take. To oppose his father, he needed subordinates he could command. On the round stage, before a huge, luxurious crowd, the auctioneer raised his hands, addressed the gathered ladies and gentlemen, and solemnly announced the start of the slave auction. They bring out the first, a frightened girl, a muscular man with scars across his torso, and a woman with long, flowing hair and handcuffs. The crowd instantly goes wild, raising the stakes and shouting increasingly larger numbers, while Xenon watches with a grim expression. The first lot went for a high price. The auctioneer presents the next one, a handsome young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. The bid starts at 100,000, and the crowd erupts with excitement again. From his seat, Xenon does not take his eyes off the stage. She watches the spectacle intently, estimating its resources. The money he pulled from the training room is already melting away, and with what remains, he could barely buy one or two slaves. He knew he needed strong fighters, but the choice was crucial and he slipped his hand into his jacket, pulling out an exquisite device shaped like a key with a round lens in the middle. He raised the device to his eye. It was the Eye of God, an item he got in the training room, originally created to test monsters' abilities, but now he had a completely different plan for it. Through the lens, the world seems to transform. He carefully scans the row of enslaved on the stage. Before each, a transparent panel with data emerges, revealing their hidden properties. The true power of this thing was that it could immediately confirm the skills and abilities of the person it was aimed at. He realized that in battle, this would become an invaluable advantage to assess the opponent's capabilities at a glance. He snorts to himself. Slaves put on display do not impress him. Those whose skills are useless in battle mean absolutely nothing to him, and he does not need such a thing as the ability to enchant. He knows skills will come later, but it is the initial abilities that set the rhythm of his growth, and the talent he is looking for simply does not exist among what is currently offered. He is appointed. He turns away from the stage and begins to leave, descending the stairs while the wealthy guests continue their empty chatter and drink. He decides that it is better to look for what he needs by another way. Just then the announcement cuts through the air. They call the last slave for today. The auctioneer's voice thundered, announcing a rare specimen on par with dragons, a girl from the Oni tribe, taken from the northern continent of half-humans. This announcement made Xenon freeze in place. His eyes widen in complete shock, and a sound of disbelief quietly escapes from his lips. In front of him stands a little girl with white hair and white skin, a golden eye shining on her forehead, and red horns protruding from her head, undeniable signs of the unique. He instantly recognizes her. Urza, the white ogre, and wonders why she is here at all. She stands chained on the auction platform, and shock pierces him. This is impossible. Urza is not a character from Dungeon Break. He recalls that Urza appeared in Holy War of War, wrote a military simulator from the Southern Kingdoms by the same developer. In that story, she was a comrade fighting for victory, so her presence in the world of Dungeon Brave makes no sense at all. While he struggles with the impossibility, the auctioneer explains that ONI is an extremely rare race that hardly ages and retains youth and high physical abilities, and the bidding explodes instantly. Bids rapidly soar from 500,000 to 700,000, then to 1 million, and finally to an astonishing 2,500,000. He desperately tried to comprehend the impossible reality before him. Is this world a fusion of Dungeon Brave 1 and 2 with the world of the Holy War, or have they somehow always been one and the same? When another enraged bidder shouted a price 5 million, he continued pondering the possibilities. Both games are from the same developer, so a shared world did not seem unbelievable, and he recalled her stats: body enhancement level 11, fighting spirit 13, and spear mastery 9. These were her 3 starting skills that had been with her from the beginning, and he had no doubt she was the perfect combat force he was looking for. He remembered the original story. Urza was initially a slave, but later joins the main hero of the Holy War, and suddenly an icy clarity pierced him. If he buys her now, he can completely break the plot of that game. She will become loyal to him, not the hero, and isn't this auction some kind of bug in the world's code? But when his thoughts finally cleared, he looked out from the balcony. His gaze froze on the stage below. On the floor, the auctioneer loudly announced the current bid: 6.5 million. Glancing at the crowd in search of more offers, Xenon stood up. The decision was made. He raised his hand and his voice broke through the whisper. The bet: 10 million. On the stage, Urza lifted her head, her eyes filled with tears, and the other hand clenched into a fist at her side. Sudden huge bets caused a wave of shock throughout the hall. The attendees looked stunned and whispered among themselves about the exorbitant price, doubting the wisdom of such a move, but he stood, raising his hand high, unshakable. He knew the price of his impulsive act. 10 million was enough to equip an entire team with the most powerful gear for fighting the final boss. A flash of regret passed through his thoughts. He had done something truly excessive. But the regret passed instantly. If his actions repeated the original, he would be cast as the villain, and he recalled that Urza White Ogre was to be saved by the hero, and the vile nobleman who tormented her was to receive bitter retribution. He accepted this role without any hesitation. He did not know the future, and was indifferent to changing the fate of the hero of the sacred wars. He was Xenon, and evil would not bind him, and when his resolve hardened, the auctioneer's voice thundered, enthusiastically confirming the bet of 10 million and asking if any other fine young man dared to challenge. The incredible bet 10 million hung in the air and stunned the auction hall into silence, and the auctioneer, drenched in sweat, only stumbled while pronouncing this amount, as the other participants looked at him with disbelief. He, however, remained completely calm and made a casual gesture from his place. From the stage, Urza raised her head, her eyes wide open and shining with admiration. he leaned back with a smile, crossing his arms as if proving that his villainous appearance was powerless against such a gaze. He leans forward slightly and, speaking toward the stage, says not to be so afraid, implying that he is helping her. This unexpected kindness makes Urza shudder. A deep blush spreads across her face, and she looks away. Just as it seems the sale is decided, a burly man in the crowd sharply raises his hand and loudly shouts a counteroffer of 10 million. The auctioneer, stunned, quickly announces that the gentleman has raised the price. Without hesitation for a moment, Xenon calmly raises the bet to 12 million. The crowd whispers in surprise at the growing numbers. Seeing no more opponents, the auctioneer strikes the hammer and announces that the only girl is sold for 12 million gold, causing a storm of applause for the young man, while the loser bitterly sinks back into his seat. The hall erupts with loud applause. Xenon marks the victory with a simple raise of his hand, a quiet satisfaction on his face. Soon, in a private room, he stands with the money on him, waiting before heavy curtains. The curtains part, revealing Urza. He stands alone, barefoot, on the carpet in the center of the luxuriously decorated room. She instantly rushed to him, hugging his leg with a joyful cry. Looking up, she said her name was Urza and promised to serve him as her new master. He froze for a moment, surprised by her boldness. She continues, her eyes sparkling with devotion, swearing to dedicate her whole life to service and asking only that he value her. Her joyful appearance sharply contrasts with his memories of the game, where Urza of the Sacred Sea was known as emotionless, like a doll, and he wonders what could have caused such a change in character. He stood still, his mind unable to reconcile the image of a cheerful puppy with the girl before him. Could this really be Urza, the white ogre? When she noticed the silence and asked if something was wrong, he quickly waved it off, but his thoughts still raced. This was not the slaving knew. From the game, this was a completely different person. While he was processing this, a burly man in a top hat approached them, an employee of the auction house, and addressed Zinnen. Did he need a change of clothes for the girl, because in her current appearance she could not be taken away? An assistant named Lispald smiled ingratiatingly and pointed to a place behind the curtain, assuring Xenon that they would find something suitable for her in the waiting room. Turning his attention to Urza, he ordered her to go with Lasbald and reassured her. There was nothing to fear. I will wait here. Urza froze, eyes wide open, asked if he really promised to wait. He lightly stroked her head, and her initial surprise quickly melted into playful protest. She insisted that she did not want to go, and this reaction again shattered all his expectations. As soon as she was released, Xenon sank into the chair nearby. The weight of the situation settled on him, and he sat silently in the quiet room, waiting. His solitude was broken by Urza's voice from behind the curtain. She shouted that she had already changed. From his place, Xenon responded, ordering her to show herself. In response, the curtain barely lifted from the floor, revealing the hem of a new dress and a pair of polished dark shoes. In the room with the checkered floor, pulls back the curtains and appears before the stunned Xenon, happily saying she is ready, but he notices she is only in a simple tunic. However, he praises her shoes. The steward Lispald says that perhaps it is better to remove the collar from her neck, and Xenon's face darkens as he looks at the metal strip on which his name is clearly engraved, Xenon Baskerville. In response, Urza explains that the slave collar is proof that she is his mistress. She clarifies that his master's name is engraved on it, and removing it would put her in danger. Crossing his arms, Xenon demands to know exactly what this danger is. From behind the curtain, Lisbon explains that a slave without a master has no human rights. Her face darkened as she spoke. Being a member of the precious Oni tribe, she says that if she were dragged and raped on the street, no one would even ask, and this thought evokes images of other dark-skinned people suffering brutal violence. From a tattered announcement came a warning. If it is shown that she is Xenon's property, she will be taken away immediately. Xenon listens, his face grim, and suddenly something surfaces in his memory. The harsh truth of her world is revealed unvarnished. In the kingdom of Slayer, half-humans are forbidden from entering cities and having relations with Eldens, dwarfs, or poor people. If someone noticed her horns, they would treat her as an escaped slave, and she even recalls Xenon's words that he does not intend to put collars on girls. Despite this, she turns to him with a bright, reassuring smile. She tells her new master not to worry, explaining that the collar is proof that she belongs to him, and with sincere joy, she exclaims that she really likes the collar. She looks away and a complex emotion plays on his face. After a moment of silence, he understands. If she does not mind, he will accept this situation for now, although he still looks uncertain. Let's fall, he waved his hand at the luxurious double doors and promised to take them to the room, assuring that no one would disturb them and they could relax. They were led to a luxurious private room with a large round bed draped with delicate fabrics. When the manager left, Xenon glanced around the room, and a chill of anxiety ran through his body. He realized all the consequences. His anxiety did not affect Urza at all. With a joyful exclamation, she began to undress, ready to start what she considered her duty. He recoiled in shock, shouting a protest when she suddenly removed her tunic without the slightest shame. Rushing forward, he grabbed her clothes to cover her and demanded that she get dressed. Urzo looked up at him, genuinely puzzled, and asked if they were not supposed to make a child. Embarrassed, Xenon sharply denied Ith had no such perverse interest in a young girl at all. He firmly poked her in the forehead, as if to emphasize, "You are terribly mistaken." He said that she would not get into such a dungeon just by changing equipment. Her eyes widened at the word dungeon, and seeing her reaction, he sat down and simply explained his true intention. He bought her as a fighter to explore dungeons with him, not as a sex object. When she heard this, she trembled with joy, exclaimed that she loved fighting, and that becoming a slave just for the chance to enter the dungeon was like her dream come true. Her cheerful behavior turned into fierce cruelty. Asked if he knew that the ogre tribe adored battles, and with a bloodthirsty smile promised to kill and take everything she could, ordering him to place great hopes on her. He looked at the box in his hands, his face tired. He did not know what to do when she said such terrible things with such an innocent, sweet look. Leaving his worries behind, he stood up and with a broad gesture pointed to what they had come for. Before them lay a mountain of the best armor, shields, weapons, and adventure gear, everything they would need for expeditions. He explained that although he himself could not wear this gear, he had specially accumulated it for his companion and handed over the weapon and accessory, saying, "Not a bad start." He asked her to try everything on, promising to make all the necessary adjustments, and she heard with a cheerful, understood how it could be changed. In a moment she returned in new dark, light combat attire, proudly struck a pose and said it was incredibly comfortable, was momentarily speechless. New gear, sturdy boots, and protective elbow pads, which replaced her simple tunic and bare feet. Her gaze fell on the massive spiked mace, an ogre mace of extreme level, which could only be lifted with the brute arm skill. Its strikes could crush skulls. She noticed that even in the human world such formidable defensive weapons existed, but among adventurers they were rarely seen, as few had the necessary mastery. Her eyes lit up with passionate joy. She firmly said that with such a weapon she could face any enemy, swearing to harden her heart and crush them all for the sake of the master. Seeing her enthusiasm, he couldn't help but smile. Her reaction pleased him. In her excitement, she grabbed her chest and exclaimed that it didn't hurt at all, and he looked at her and aloud wondered if all the ogres in the tribe were so obsessed with battle. A heavy mace slipped from her hands and thudded on the floor. She turned to him with a sincere look and confessed her love, and he demanded to know why she could say such a thing to a man she barely knew, reminding her that he only gave her the equipment because he bought her to fight in dungeons, and he didn't understand where these feelings came from, while she just looked at him, embarrassed by his reaction. She shyly admitted that she had a weakness for certain faces. For her, his face was incredibly attractive, and she was glad to belong to such a master. He was completely embarrassed, unable to comprehend her words. He imagined his features, sharp eyes, a hawk nose, a face that, as he knew, radiated evil intentions and repelled others. Suddenly, school years flashed in his mind. He remembered how the girls in class openly recoiled from his sinister smile. But here this girl saw something completely different, and his gaze slid down to her brand new boots. She asks if she is serious, and Urza loudly says yes, adding that his burning, intimidating gaze, fangs as if ready to tear flesh, and overall evil aura make him her ideal, like some legendary demonic god. She continues, her eyes shining. She says she was enchanted by his amazingly sinister face from the first moment at the auction, and the fact that he was the one who bought her fate. He is completely confused. Never before has a woman praised him, and even now it doesn't feel like praise at all. His head is spinning. He thinks it's better to be liked than hated, but doubts if anyone besides close comrades could really like him. He pushes the thought away, decides to move on, and tells her that they're going to change her clothes, so she should follow them. As they were about to leave, the auction manager, less bold, approached them, and slyly smiling, remarked that Xenon tamed the girl very quickly, saying the young master is as formidable at night as his father. This hint annoys him, and he now tells the manager to stop the empty talk. It's already annoying. Bowing deeply, Lisbon apologizes and tells the young master that the slave girl has been prepared and is ready. The deal is done. He walks away, strolling down a quiet, lantern-lit cobblestone street under the night sky. He doesn't stay alone for long. Urza walks a few steps behind, humming a cheerful song and lightly carrying her huge spiked mace. He notices the silence of the street and thinks it makes the path easier. The road to the manor will take about an hour, so they will make it by dawn. He looks back and marvels. For a person with such a bulky weapon, she moves amazingly lightly, almost like a rabbit. Suddenly his movement freezes. A small glove clung tightly to the back of his cloak, and Ursula calls him. He turns and looks down at her with a questioning expression, as if asking what's going on. His gaze follows the direction she is looking, and instantly a wide-eyed expression of shock appears on his face. His feeling did not fail him. On the narrow lamplit street, 3 threatening figures blocked their way, faces hidden in shadow, standing ready for a fight. The trio turned out to be only the vanguard armed men emerged from the surrounding alleys and quickly closed a wide, inescapable circle around Xenon and Urza on the cobblestones. A figure stepped out from among the thugs, and Xenon's eyes narrowed. He recognized her. He dryly remarked that falling into an ambush is a real nuisance, and added that they had met again. The same wealthy auction buyer smiled maliciously. A mask of twisted satisfaction appeared on his face. Xenon indifferently asked who he was, and the bitter Scot, not believing that Xenon did not remember the man who paid 2 million, asked if Xenon really thought he could just ignore a person of such stature. He continued, explaining that the auction had cost him more than he expected. While he spoke, Xenon stood completely still, his face unreadable. He pretended and falsely apologized. Supposedly only winners rule here, so Xenon must forgive, then demanded to know what this defeated dog intended to do and ordered to bring his friend along. His face twisted like a mannequin's mask. "I lost." He proclaimed this with enthusiasm. "This is a fun party. I insist that you both join me." Before Xenon could respond, Urza spoke. She proposed discussing the transfer of the humanoid creature next to her. If he agreed to give up Xenon, she would allow it, but first she would break his arms and legs. Xenon thought all this entirely predictable and boring, reasoning that the man was so offended by the defeat that he brought friends to persuade him. Around the cutthroats it tightened. Knives, pipes, and crowbars gleamed in their hands. In the center of the enemy ring, Xenon and Urza stood back to back, tense and ready for the inevitable fight. He stood unmoved with a fearless smile on his lips, looking at the gang of thugs, while above, the rich man with a malicious and greedy smile demanded to hand over the girl. Xenon, despite the numerical superiority of the enemies, was cold-bloodedly considering his next move and did not know what to do himself. The rich man with a malicious smile looks down arrogantly at Xenon, standing below in the alley. Surrounded by other half-humans, Xenon listens as someone asks what exactly a half-human is, and another throws in that they don't even come close to being human. But unfazed, Xenon turns to the one with the malicious smile and asks if they don't speak a common language in this country, noting that it seems only he doesn't understand this here. Urza stands defiantly, her hidden baton at the ready, silently seething with indignation, wondering who decided that demihumans are a lower form of life, and the very thought itself is humiliating. While the contender boiled with rage, Xenon sharply declared, "Now she is mine, and I will not give her up." Urza was clearly moved. Her cheeks reddened with gratitude for his words, but the contender exploded even more fiercely and threatened that if Xenon did not value his life, he would gladly take it. He continues the tirade, boasting about his high position in the country, saying that Xenon cannot even imagine such a thing, mockingly says he could easily pay 12 million for her, then makes an offer. If Xenon hands over that rare half-human, he will arrange a higher position for him and satisfy his desires even more. Urza holds tightly to him, Xenon crosses his arms, and suddenly a familiar memory emerges. Pompous speeches with grand gestures, and he realizes, this is a man from the kingdom of Kuran. He calmly asks whether the person this claimant serves is not the agitator of the marshal of the kingdom of Kuran. The claimant's face distorts with genuine shock, and he lets out a stifled groan. Calm shattered bitter hesitations ask how he could have known about it at all. Xenon just smiles. He remembers that although the name of that minor character was erased from memory, he remembers. They and someone else were enemies in the game Holy See. His knowledge of the game proved flawless. Marshall's agitators preferred young half-human girls, and Urza was to become yet another of his slaves, doomed to a huge terrible prison with countless cells holding other captive girls. Xenon explains to Urza, who is now in a coma, that in the original story she would have been saved by the main hero of the Holy Throne and would have become his companion. He shifts his gaze to Bitter, who is already distracted by a small creature on a chain, and Xenon mentally tells himself, now that this connection is clear, everything falls into place. Turning all his attention back to the enraged man, the panicked man demands to know how Xenon found out about his master, and Xenon coldly replies that he is not obliged to tell him anything. Bitter's face twisted with rage, he looks at Xenon's wrist, his voice a low roar, and he declares that since it is already known who he is, Xenon must die here and now. He remains completely calm and aloud wonders why the nobles from the kingdom of Kuran ended up in this country. With a sly smile, he says that if they were looking for a fight, they were gravely mistaken, and declaring that he will gladly repay, becomes a blurred whirl of movement. His blade flashed, and he effortlessly cuts through the thugs. During the fight, with a cruel smile, he realizes that the events are again following the scenario of the game, Holy See, and decides that without hesitation he will destroy any hostile characters who stand in the way of the main hero. When his enemies were instantly felled, he turned to Urza and handed her a huge spiked mace, calling it a gift. He said that her first task was to prepare the weapon, and Urza, trembling with excitement, showed a sharp tusked smile and gladly accepted it. Then he orders her to watch his back and not to move for now, noting her beautiful, warrior-like expression. While Urza stands with a determined look, he summons a grimoire, an item called a magical conduit, and begins to channel power through it. As glowing runes swirl around him, the nobleman, filled with bitterness, panics seeing the spell take shape. He shouts to his survivors, "Kill Xenon immediately." From her place, Urza narrowed her eyes and closely watches what unfolds. With a savage growl, he releases the spell, roaring its name into the night, the darker gift magic that affects the surrounding area, called Blood Carpenter. The ground instantly grows a forest of sharp black spikes and pierces the crazed thugs. Their screams cut off, blood splashes on the alley walls. The nobleman falls into horror, and even he shudders at the sheer cruelty of the sight. He stands amid the bloody chaos. A trembling hand covers his mouth. He recognizes this cruel magic of torture, the same one his father used, and a wave of disgust washes over him because he does not understand why dark magic seems so vile. Shaking off the disgust, he turns to Urza and says she can finish the rest. Her eyes flash with wild joy. She says she has been waiting for this, promises to carve them all up, and rushes at the last thug and the frightened bidders. She bursts into the fight, swinging the huge spiked mace with a cheerful cry, and the enraged nobleman, recoiling backward, can only watch in disbelief at the fierce attack of the little girl. The weapon struck with a disgusting crunch, shattering bone and instantly silencing one of the thugs. When the body falls, the wealthy man recoils in horror and curses the girl, calling her a monster. The horror recedes, giving way to rage. Shouting, he draws a short sword and lunges into the air to bring the blade down on Earth's head, and she simply raises her eyes upward, her face impassive, and he, stunned, freezes, watching what happens next. His blade halts, the edge pressed to her neck, yet not a drop of blood is spilled. He presses with all his might, sweat pouring from his forehead, shouting for her to let go. She responds with a burst of dark, bat-like energy that erupts from her body and shatters the steel sword to pieces. When the furious man was disarmed, her gaze fell on the last subdued bandit who begged for mercy. Urza raised a finger to her lips, a playful sparkle appeared in her eyes, and she said it was in vain he was the last, and her master's enemies must be killed. Xenon looks from above at the aftermath. He sees Urza's mace, now swift like a comet of dark power, racing down the alley toward its final target, and he smiles, thinking to himself that she is truly strong. In a moment she is already beside him, proudly announcing that she is finished. Xenon praises her for a job well done and gently strokes her head, and Urza closes her eyes, blushes, and quietly whispers that his touch is pleasant to her. Praise was given, and Xenon's gaze falls on the sole survivor below. He addresses the frightened, embittered rich man now floundering on the cobblestones, asking what to do now that his friends have disappeared, and the man can only plead, "Wait." He listened as the man on the ground tried to take his own life, first throwing threats, claiming he was a nobleman of the kingdom of Kuran, and that his death would become a diplomatic problem. When that didn't work, the man's voice turned to pleading, saying that if they just hid his body, no one would ever find out. Finally, he repented and whispered that it would have been better to surrender at the auction. His face remained unchanged. The man's words passed through his mind, and he thought that he already had a natural inclination to kill nobles. Before this encounter, he had already killed 3 with magic, and even the first killing left his heart cold. He felt no guilt, only an icy emptiness from which a monstrous shadow aura began to emerge. The frightened man made one last desperate plea, offering any sum just to be spared. Xenon's lips curled into a cruel smile. Even if he were not a basketball, his true nature would have led to this. He turned to the ready Urs and remarked that the man clearly was not lacking money, and she dryly nodded, "Yes, sir," and moved forward toward the sobbing man. She raised the heavy mace and froze in the swing, preparing for a devastating downward strike. Bitter screamed, begging her to stop. Her rocking stopped for a moment. On her face was a barely noticeable surprise, and below the man only stared, frozen with pure horror. His horror was cut off when a thin, sharp dart suddenly struck the back of his head. Urza watched, her mace still raised, while the man collapsed. He sharply turned his head, his eyes wide with anxiety. He felt no presence nearby, and urgently shouted to Urzi to retreat. He had already moved. Deep anxiety was readable on his face. He thought that perhaps he had missed the attacker, but the fact that Urza, a member of the warrior clan, was caught off guard deeply troubled him. Urza herself seemed confused. She looked at her feet and answered confusedly, "Yes, sir." He stopped, his gaze ran along the dark alley nearby. Urza also tensed, weapon ready. "Where are you?" he sharply demanded of the invisible attacker. From the darkness came a calm voice, called him by his full name, and quietly said there was nothing to worry about. He was thrown to the ground, his face pressed to the cold cobblestones. From the darkness of the night emerged a shadow. A formidable new enemy loomed over him. A mysterious figure firmly placed a boot on his head. Gritting his teeth, he demanded to know, "You." In the quiet alley, Xenon demanded to know who that figure was. The masked stranger introduced himself as a member of the Baskerville Family Assassin Organization, and and said he was hired by Lisbon. This made Zenon ask if their task was to watch over him, the one supporting his father. The assassin explained in detail. This happened often. Auction guests were frequently attacked on the way home, and he clarified that his goal was to protect Zenon at the client's request. The logic was flawless. The auction was more than a simple deal. It was a spectacular high-stakes game, a place where the rich arrogantly show others their economic power. He continued the inspection and realized, such an environment pushes to reckless actions. Buying an expensive slave without protection is an open invitation to bandits. Confirming his assumptions, the assassin reported that guards were indeed unnecessary. They had already ensured that the future basketball heir was safe. When the situation was resolved, he returned to Urza and said it was time to go. Praise for becoming his father's successor was not interesting to him at all, and Urza simply nodded in agreement. As they were preparing to leave, the killer, still on his knees, asked him to be careful and assured him, "Don't worry about the bodies, we will take care of them." He and Urza set off into the night, leaving behind the grand auction house. He eagerly awaited the day he would meet the demonic basketball dog again. A little later, returning to his room, Zenon lay down fully clothed on the bed and sighed deeply. "So I felt the weight of the whole day. Only 2 weeks had passed since he found himself in this world, and today he killed for the first time. It seemed strange to him because he did it without hesitation, but he felt it was necessary, and now he wondered if his own cruelty was emerging, or perhaps he was influenced by the psyche of the original Zeno. He lay in bed thinking about the killing, understanding why Urza, a representative of a warrior race, could take life. But until recently, he himself was an ordinary person and could not imagine how to kill without feeling guilt. He clenched his fist and asked himself who he had become. His thoughts flew to the world of the game Dample, where enemies were not only monsters, players also had to fight cultists, bandits, and other criminals. He decided to accept this new reality. In a prolonged battle, there was no room for hesitation to defeat enemies. One had to act without delay. With Urzen nearby, he could finally begin exploring the dungeon. He sat on the bed considering options. The appearance of the powerful Urza in his squad significantly increased the chances of survival, but only 2 attackers made the team unbalanced. A mage or healer was needed. But there was no rush. The main part of the scenario was just beginning, and standing before the majestic doors, he decided, if he was going to be greedy, it was better to aim high. His strategic plans were suddenly shattered by a panicked scream. "Master, it's Urza." She was covered in soap foam from head to toe, eyes tightly shut from anxiety. In panic, her foot slipped on the slippery, soapy floor. She fell forward headlong and crashed right into Zenon, who was completely unprepared for this. "Oh, my eyes hurt, the maid is tormenting me," she howled. He barely had time to recover when a woman in a towel grabbed his arm. It was a servant, Leviana. "My eyes," she exclaimed, and immediately began demanding explanations for why he was hugging Zenon's sister-in-law. Stunned and suddenly blood started flowing from his nose, Zenon just froze in shock. The chaos subsided. Leviana began washing Urza's hair, patiently asking her to rinse the foam well. However, Urza did not want to let go of Zenon, clinging to him and whining that her eyes still hurt. Embarrassed, Zenon wondered how he could possibly make that ogre open her eyes and let him go. Leviana said it was impossible. The ogre tribe was incredibly strong, and attempts to tear her away by force were futile. With a heavy heart, Zenon realized he had no choice. Suddenly, before him appeared a seductive image of his sister-in-law, who beckoned him to join her in the bath. His shocked, embarrassed reaction did not go unnoticed. Leviana watched and jokingly asked if he was blushing because of her, adding that he would be better off ashamed because of his sister-in-law. Seeing his further agitation, she thoughtfully said that such a reaction must mean that there was already a deep connection between him and his sister-in-law, a thought from which he recoiled in torment. Summoning his courage, he clenched his fist and understood. Resisting was useless. He would go bathe, but not to join Leviana, rather because it was a necessary step to reveal his true self. With the final decision made, they headed to the bathroom, Leviana leading the way. He agreed to go, though inwardly he groaned because Urza was still firmly clinging to his back. Once in the water, playfully splashed him, and he blushed with embarrassment. 3 shared a large bathtub full of bubbles. Urza looked satisfied, and Levi and I cheerfully winked and gave a thumbs up, clearly happy with how everything turned out. After the bath, sleepy Urza, already in pajamas, said that the warm water was pleasant and that she wanted to sleep with the master. Leviana immediately intervened, stopped Urza, and explained that a bed had been prepared for her in another place. Urza stubbornly refused and loudly expressed her dissatisfaction. But it turned out Urza's protest worked. Zinin lay in bed with eyes wide open, squeezed between a sleeping ogre girl and his sister-in-law. He realized that this was probably a compromise and could not imagine how he would manage to fall asleep in such a situation. Lying in a luxurious bedroom, one desperate thought echoed in his mind. What kind of trial is this? He woke up abruptly, Yesterday's bathing replayed in his head again, which had turned into an unforgettable trial. He swore to the gods that he did nothing and touched no one. When the sunlight flooded the luxurious room, he sighed with relief, grateful that morning had finally come. He remained trapped in bed, pressed between his sleeping sister-in-law and Urza, who clung tightly to him. A wave of despair overwhelmed him. Could this really become his reality every time, every day? He silently begged forgiveness for any sin that led to this. The worst scenarios spun in his mind. What if he made a move on Leviana? How would Urzari behave? He did not know if she would avoid, be frightened, or perhaps even be interested, and the scariest thing was that one of the options he simply could not predict. His sister-in-law next to him began to stir. His gaze jumped to Urza. She was murmuring in her sleep and asking him to hug her. He reminded himself that he bought Urza's weapon not out of feelings and had no intention of pursuing the young girl, so he did not know how to respond to such requests. His thoughts were interrupted when Urza shifted and revealed her bare legs. He blinked, stunned, and suddenly doubted her age. She seemed older than he initially thought. His mind was raging with frantic, conflicting thoughts. Could she be at an age where his courtship would be acceptable? Lack of sleep and constant stress prevented him from thinking clearly. And just then Urza's eyes trembled open. She sleepily rubbed them and greeted, "Good morning, master." Her innocent greeting shattered his torment. He sighed tensely, a drop of sweat rolled down his face. There was no doubt she was just a child. This realization brought a strange relief. At that very moment in the morning, another voice was heard. His sister-in-law had already woken up and cheerfully said, "Good morning, Zinin Bakama," gently touched his cheek and asked if he had slept well, completely unaware of the chaos she had stirred in his soul. He recoiled from her touch, stunned. It seemed impossible. This whole situation was simply too much for him. Later at the dining table, Leviana placed a full breakfast before Urza. The maid said she would immediately prepare the morning dish and asked them to wait. Her professional composure sharply contrasted with the morning chaos. Dressed in formal academic uniform, Zenon announced that he was leaving. Turning to Urza, also in uniform, he reminded her that they were going to the academy and she should remember what she was taught yesterday. She exploded with energy, raised her fist, and promised that she would cause no trouble. Zenon watched her and thought that the decision to bring her to the Royal Academy had been made from the very beginning for the nobility. It was customary to have servants and guards with them. Their thoughts do not subside as they walk along the rough, forest-covered path leading them away from the city. The Academy's program includes dungeon research and monster taming, so he has to take Urza with him on these dangerous excursions. When they approach the carriage waiting, he throws the last warning: any trouble at the Academy and she will not be allowed on the premises. With a broad smile, Urza readily agrees, assuring that she will behave as best as possible just to stay with the master. I can catch them at the moment when the carriage door firmly shuts. Inside, Urza peeks out the window, and admiration blooms on her face at the city streets flying past. The journey begins. Zenon sits opposite her, arms crossed and a gloomy expression on his face. Urza, completely unaware of this, kneels on the seat to get a better look, humming a cheerful tune. His stone silence does not change, and her joyful song grows louder, a simple melody about how she is going to school with the master. Finally, he spoke, asking why she suddenly sings so strangely and what made her so happy. Turning to him, she continued singing and explained that it was because her home was now full. Throwing his head back, he looked at the size of the Zenon, hesitating whether it was really right to take her with him. He behaved simply. "Urza, are you having fun?" She leans forward in her clothes, eyes shining, and sharply throws an enthusiastic yes. Her song continues, but her face changes. A chilling predatory light ignites in her eyes. A toothy smile unfolds on her lips. She sings the last terrible line and carves them out. The eerie words hung in the air, and deep anxiety descended on Zenon. When their carriage rattled and stopped before the majestic facade of the Royal Academy, his anxiety surged. After a long night, he was overwhelmed by a strange unease, and he could not shake the feeling that another wave of upheavals was about to begin. Before the majestic facade of the Academy, a decorated carriage stops. Zenon Baskerville steps out, followed by the young half-human Urza, who jumps down from the footboard, full of restless energy. 3 nearby students turn around to look at their noticeable arrival. The gaze got stuck on one of the cars, and one of the students instantly recognized the emblem, whispering to the others that it was the carriage of the Baskerville family. She steps forward and instantly becomes the center of whispers and watchful glances. The students around point at her horns and collar, calling her Dimmy, a human slave, while Zenon, who was walking behind, prepared for the spectacle and realized that she was getting much more attention than he expected. She, however, simply shines with joy. Her face glows as she smiles and tells Zenon how happy she was to accompany her master to the academy and cheerfully announces that she will escort her. His face tenses with anxiety. He quickly tells her that she does not know the way to the classroom and orders her to quietly follow him like an adult. Having given the command, Zenon decisively strides forward, cutting through the sea of curious students. Urza steps into stride right behind him, obediently following. Other students watched them go. Someone muttered about Zenon's, and his face was eerily emotionless. Urza, on the contrary, looks around her new surroundings with wide open, sparkling eyes full of admiration. Comes from the great continent of half-humans lands beyond human territories. Their people are a warrior race bred for battle. The open question remains, can such a person truly adapt to communal life at the academy? She whistles a cheerful melody to calm him, says that everything will be fine, she is only a companion and will not cause any problems. But her face suddenly fills with anxiety as she notices him barely clenching his side. She tugs his sleeve and asks if everything is all right with her master, if his stomach hurts. He gently stroked her head, dismissing her worries, and said it was not a problem, he just got a little lost, and was momentarily lost in thought. He sternly warned his new assistant. From now on, she must avoid anything that even slightly smells of trouble. If Urza just obeys, he assured, there will be no problems. Walking towards the building of the Great Academy, he suddenly realized he had forgotten one very important thing and angrily stomped his foot, thinking that trouble is not always what you are looking for. More often it comes to you. Premonition came true instantly. A sharp voice shouted his family name, Baskerville. Leon Praise stood before him, ready for battle, and declared that trouble had indeed arrived. He shows an accusing finger and demands an explanation of what Zenon is doing with the little girl in the slave collar. Leon calls him a villain, a man who cannot be ignored because he sees himself as Leon the Brave, a hero of justice, ready to risk his life for a stranger and not allow himself to stand aside, watching this injustice. His anger flares up when he recalls that recent adventure in the dungeon again. He admits that he used to think, Zenon is not so bad because he helped classmates, but this is proof that he was wrong. He shouts that Zenon is exactly as he seems, a real basketball, a creator of pointless problems. The scuffle attracts the attention of other students in the academy courtyard. A crowd gathers, and Zenon just clicks his tongue, he finds it all boring. Meanwhile, another student stands aside and watches closely, analyzing the situation and thinking about what to do next. According to the script, Leon must defeat the demon lord and save the world, so he cannot allow Leon to be distracted by the incident with the gargoyle. He will not let himself lose the chance to become a hero. Under the spires of the academy, there is a palpable tense confrontation between Zenon and Leon, and the observer's inner irritation finally explodes. Why must Zenon interfere with Leon's path? He grabbed his head, cursing his fate. Reality, he realizes, is nothing like a game. Unexpected events keep disrupting the plot. He sees a colorful girl and thinks she must be freed, but then recognizes the true source of this problem. Leon himself is praying. Suddenly, the academy director intervened and addressed the crowd. He announced that Zenon had followed all legal procedures when buying his slave girl, and the school had given official permission for her to accompany him. The students around were shocked and outraged, and the director told Leon directly that he had no grounds for complaint. Zenon crossed his arms, and a self-satisfied winner's smile shone on his face. Thoughts involuntarily returned to the supposed Leon, this so-called hero of justice, especially when it came to women and children. At that moment, Shell Uranus appeared, fists clenched, face in rage. Nearby, Leon consulted with a classmate, asking if it could be left like that, and whether it was worth using force to take Earth. He was tossing and turning, trying to understand what the law said here. In this country, slavery was officially considered property. Forcibly tearing a slave from the master's hands was not rescue, but a crime. He knew that if he took her by force, it would be called robbery. Zenon looked at him and thought what a typical move for Leon to get involved in such a complicated mess, wasting time and money. Suddenly, a cynical thought flashed in his mind. How much would Leon pay for her? What is the price of her freedom? From his detached perspective, the gamer protagonist thought that all RPG heroes are like that, they always choose the picturesque detour. He found it amusing, but he admitted that the main hero should behave that way. Turning his attention back to the scene, Zenon sharply told Leon, "Go away," placed his hand on Urza's head, and declared that he would not sell her for any money. She is his important slave and subordinate. Finally, he threw "See you in class" and turned away. Enraged by the refusal, Leon rushed forward, shouting that Zenon was an idiot because he still didn't understand, grabbed him by the shoulder, and sharply turned him around. He threw a punch and Zenon was caught off guard, but before he could hit, an angry scream sounded. Urza will not forgive anyone who dares to lay a hand on her master. It was a foolish move. Attacking in front of a crowd of witnesses put Leon in an extremely disadvantageous position. Incredible agility, she suddenly jumped into the air, swung a huge spiked club, the size of which was unbelievable for such a small body. Leon and Zenon stared upward, completely stunned by her sudden, harsh intervention. With a furious roar, she lowered the weapon between them. The mace struck the stone pavement with destructive force, breaking the ground and sending cracks in all directions. Leon recoiled backward, his face a mask of disbelief. She stood over the crater, her red eyes blazing with protective fury. She growled that she would not allow her master's enemies to escape and swore to beat them all to death. With a loud crash, she brought down her huge spiked mace, growling that she would splatter his insides. Leon, his face pale with horror, raised his hand and pleaded to wait and calm down so they could talk. The sword barely held under the crushing force of her club. From the crowd of students, Shell Uranus shouted to Leon to stop and said he was not an enemy of Earth. And under enormous pressure, Leon shouted back that he just wanted to be freed from slavery, and Shell begged him to listen. Her eyes remained cold and unyielding. There was no room for conversation for her. Her relentless assault raised a wave of panic among the spectators. The students scattered in terror. Leon turned and fled, saving his life, and Urza rushed after him in a hot pursuit, shouting for him to wait, while Xenon watched this chaos, and a drop of sweat ran down his temple. He grabbed his head in despair. This was no time to stand idly by. He knew that the master's duty was to stop the mad assistant. With such determination, he dashed forward, shouting at Urza to wait, and she looked back with a wild smile and declared that she would instantly kill her master's enemies. He shouted again, demanding that she listen to her master, but knew it was probably in vain. Once Urza entered a battle frenzy, she completely ignored the surrounding world, and he could only watch as she rushed forward with a face of pure bliss. Chaos among the students intensified. Screams and panic filled the air. They pushed and scattered, shouting for everyone to run before they ended up under crossfire, and for someone to hurry and call the teacher. He then realized he had no choice, only he could stop Urza. He could not allow his master to die in such a place, so, gathering his resolve, he roared, "Pull yourself together, alone." With a fierce scream, Urza swung the stick and brought it down straight into Leon's chest. But a moment before the blow, Xenon's hands shot forward and grabbed the heavy weapon. The force of the strike instantly faded, and Urza, along with the spectators, froze in stunned silence. He did not let go, and a wave of energy rushed through Leon, his face contorted in a silent scream of pain. Shock threw Leon to his knees, his body convulsed, and foam burst from his mouth. When he suddenly fell, the crowd of students gasped in horror. They just stood there, unable to believe their eyes. Ignoring the crowd, Xenon turned to Urza, who was ready to fight, and sharply ordered her to stop. This must be the last strike. Nearby, Shell Uranus exclaimed in surprise, asking her mistress what she was doing here, while Urza stood, embarrassed by the order. Even addressed the stunned crowd, waved it off, and called the whole affair a pleasant misunderstanding, sneeringly noting how shameful it was that it happened in broad daylight, and told Urza it was time to go. The other students could only mutter awkwardly as Arif and Shell watched this strange scene unfold. Before leaving, he apologized deeply one last time to those present. On the ground, Leon lay completely broken, and his suffering seemed to have come to an end. The main character had been avenged. After the clash, two people in uniform carry Leon Pries on a stretcher, his body limp, and nearby a student, trying to explain to the worried Shell Uranus, says that Leon suddenly became cruel, but only because he was attacked by a little girl, Baskerville's companion, who fought back. The student dryly adds, the girl was simply stronger. The incident instantly becomes the subject of gossip. Among the students gathered near the academy gates, whispers spread through the crowd about whether Leon broke the rules, and on everyone's lips was Xena. The academy director was immediately summoned. He admitted that Leon was not without fault either, but sharply reprimanded Xenon for defending himself too strongly and forbade him from causing further trouble. When they were alone, Xenon snapped at Urza, grabbed her by the face, and warned her never to be brought to the academy again. She agreed without hesitation, and he softened a little, asked her to be careful, and confessed that it hurt him too. This is a stern warning. Xenon brings Urza with him into a huge multi-level lecture hall and sits among the other students. When Xenon settles in, a smiling student with shaved sides approaches him and addresses him as Baskerville. Xenon looks confused, not recognizing the boy, and the boy immediately reminds him that Xenon saved him during a gargoyle attack. Shell and Aerith from their seats noticed the friendly gesture and quietly whispered about that event, recalling that Leon, although unpopular, was actually a good person who only tried to stop Xenon from hurting Urza. Meanwhile, the friendly student walks alongside Xenon and Urza and asks if he is being too annoying, and Xenon mysteriously says that although he feels the urge to put a collar on the sweet girl, he considers it a crime. And without stopping, he cheerfully remarks that for a person with such a handsome face, Xenon's constant frowning is a real mystery. Next to the stone-faced one, Urza shines with joy. Since Xenon saved him, all his negative feelings towards the basketball family disappeared, but his praise was cut off when a girl with a high ponytail excitedly shouted, called Urz cute, and rushed to hug her. Other girls instantly swarmed around, ready to pet her and wanted to stroke her as if she were a tamed demon lord, which clearly annoyed Xenon. Only one student leaned over and explained to Xenon that the girl Alice simply adores small animals and does not at all treat Urza like an animal. Xenon softened a bit, believing in her good intentions, and Urza, when he realized he was compared to an animal, was struck by a funny shock with wide-open eyes. He pats Xenon's shoulder and says that being liked by a girl is a good thing because for a woman to earn contempt is a terrible thing. This remark makes Xenon think. He props his chin with his hand, gloomy from the sudden thought that Urza was the root of the incident with Leon, and that ultimately, as a supervisor, the responsibility for everything might fall on him. In the lecture hall, the teacher announces the start of the class. Students settle into their seats. Alice energetically waves at Urza, and she blushes confusedly and asks to be let go. Outside the academy, silence reigns. Leon was absent again for another day. The curse that struck him was quite strong, and the healing magic injection used to treat him was probably powerful. In the noisy cafeteria, Zenon savors his lunch, and his friendly classmate remarks that a week for recovery is long. Zenon, however, thinks happily. Since his noisy master disappeared, he finally enjoys a quiet school life. He notices Shell Uranus looking at him angrily from the other end of the room. Although she seems to want to speak, he has no intention of engaging in conversation, and her angry expression instantly dissolves into embarrassed awkwardness. Meanwhile, 2 more female students approached Urza with plates of cake and enthusiastically offered her to eat dessert together, which greatly surprised her. Later, she joyfully eats a piece of meat and exclaims that it is tasty. Thanks to the new popularity, Zenon notices that his status in the class has risen. Now more classmates want to talk to him. The students surround her, offer more food, and say how cute she is like a hamster stuffing its cheeks. Urza, blushing, protests. She does not want to be treated like a child. Sunlight pours onto the building of the great academy. In the dining hall, they talked again about Leon, and a friendly student suggested that it was not surprising that he did not return when you are beaten so badly that you can no longer have children. It breaks anyone. Suddenly, Leon Praise appears, points at Xenon with an accusing finger, and shouts that he is a fool for stealing someone else's slave. Xenon listens, calmly takes a sip of his drink, and thinks to himself that he had such suspicions too. He was undoubtedly the type whose sense of justice burst out a hot-tempered, fiery hero who often acted on impulse without thinking ahead. Xenon realized that Leon before him was not at all the one he had seen in the game. In that world, saving enslaved children was considered a noble act of a good person, but this is reality, not a game, and following such rules made Leon a big problem. In manga or anime, such a hero might seem charming, but not here. It was clear to me that reality is not a simple story. It cannot be divided into good and evil. There are too many shades of gray here, and just the thought that such a hero could call me a villain made me terribly angry. Xenon decided that Leon was just too serious and clumsy. Sometimes it is better simply not to pay attention to such people and turn away. That is exactly what he thought while biting a piece of food in the company of nature lovers. Meanwhile, at another table, one of the students noted that although Leon is a fool, he is not a bad person. Next to him, Alice cheerfully offered her some of her food. Xenon overheard this and silently agreed. He hoped that someday he and Leon would find understanding after all. Both were step by step moving toward the goal, to defeat the demon lord. While he took a sip of his drink, Urza, surrounded by a mountain of empty plates, joyfully announced that she was full. Xenon told her it was time to leave. After eating, they set off down a long, sunlit corridor. When they were leaving, a conversation outside caught his eye. He looked out the window and saw Leon and another boy talking to Eret. The other students looked satisfied, and Leon was persistently asking Eret why it was impossible. He tried to recruit her. Another student, glowing with excitement, invited Eret to his group, and Leon persistently swore that they would definitely protect her. He explained that they would be the vanguard, and as a healer she would be safe, fervently asking her to at least try to join them on the next expedition, but she seemed hesitant to agree. Looking out the window, Xenon recognized her instantly. It was Eret Centria, the Saint of Centria from the game, the main heroine and the only character with a unique healer sage class. He could not understand why Leon was so insistently trying to recruit her just for a dungeon raid, and nearby tugged his sleeve and asked what caught his attention. He watched as Eris stood confused, realizing what was happening. Leon and his partner appeared before her, and Leon insisted that she wait, explaining that this was the decisive moment when she was destined to join his team, and she, with a quiet sigh, seemed to understand it. He declared unequivocally that it was already decided she would join them. His face was stern, leaving no chance to argue, and he persistently asked her to go with them. He took her by the hand and pulled her forward. Eret's initial surprise changed to a gentle blush. She did not look away from him as he led her through a rain of petals, and a barely noticeable smile played on her lips. From a nearby window, Xenon watched with a knowing smile, and he again felt how deeply to see this forgotten event with his own eyes. His self-satisfaction instantly shattered, his eyes widened in disbelief, and he grabbed the window frame. Something went terribly and completely unexpectedly wrong. Through the window he saw Leon rushing down the corridor. leaving Eret behind, and when Urza shouted anxiously, asking her master not to stand up so suddenly, Xenon's mind spun from unbearable pain. She stood alone, a single tear slowly ran down her cheek. With a trembling voice she lamented that Leon was gone again, and a picture flashed through her thoughts. He sat lonely and depressed. Her friends gathered around her in the middle of a sunflower field, their faces filled with anxiety. One asked what would happen to this event now, another wondered if Farida was satisfied with this outcome, and then, addressing the invisible Xenon, the young man directly asked him, "What should we do?" Rat Centria lowers her head and reluctantly agrees to go with them, but immediately emphasizes only this time. Non, surrounded by Leon Pries and another student, throws at her. "Don't be difficult, we'll meet after school and prepare for the dungeon," and her hand squeezes the bow on her uniform, a quiet sign of unease. When they leave, she looks back, her face full of anxiety. It was an unexpected turn. She was supposed to be a minor character, not the heroine. She suspects that Xenon targeted her because of her noble origin, and his intentions are clearly evil. From the neighboring window, Leon watches them leave, his face a mask of pain. He doesn't know what he can do. The companions laugh and mock him because Xenon turned his dear Aerith into stone. This thought throws Leon into an abyss of despair. Aerith will no longer be his partner, and Xenon, watching from the window, thinks this is a real nuisance, but so be it. He turns away from the window and walks down the sunlit corridor, pressing his hand to his temple in irritation. Urza silently follows behind him. In the large lecture hall, the students joyfully spent their break. One fiery young man waved to his friends and declared he was running to the training ground, while others discussed the expedition to the sage's platform. Xenon sits and watches, his eyes narrowed in thought, observing how Aerith is cornered by his two accomplices. After putting things back in place and clicking his tongue out of boredom, he watches as his comrades decide to head to the lair of the Corpse King, a cave dungeon known to be difficult for mages and priests, supposedly suitable for beginners. Golems mostly inhabit it, and Xenon thinks that with such companions there is no real threat of death, but some bad premonition does not leave him. His smoldering irritation finally bursts out. He sharply stands up and loudly says that he is bored and irritated. Staying here will only spoil his mood even more. He decides to go to the dungeon alone to clear his head. When he turns to leave, Urza raises her eyes from behind the table and asks, "Master, where are we going now?" He irritably looks back, admits that going out is a real nuisance, but says they are heading to the place of this sage's trials. She tilts her head and asks why he didn't follow that woman from there earlier, and the question catches him off guard. He sharply cuts off. "Why would I do that?" He confirms her suspicion with a sinister smile, admitting she is right. Urza, with eyes wide open in curiosity, persistently asks him if he is worried because he looks like he is about to rush into pursuit. In response, she insists that if he is going to chase them, he should hurry. Instead, Xenon puts his hand on her head and explains that he never decided to chase them, saying nothing special will happen, and adds that Urza seems to see more than just a fight, and this unexpectedly interests him. His thoughts drift to Leon's companions. Although their actions do not break the rules, it is a cunning way to capture hunting grounds, a typical tactic of the main hero's party, and looking at their goal, the lair of the Corpse King, he decides that there is so little difficulty there that they will manage without his help, unless they are extremely unlucky. This definitively cements one of the fundamental laws of the world he found himself in. The main heroine must be saved by the hero Leon, and the villain Xenon has no role in this scenario. He understands that intervening is a fatal mistake. If he saved Aerith and took her away from the main hero, it would break the established narrative, and Leon's resolute face flickers in his thoughts, reminding him of the hero's role. The burden of this knowledge settles on him. His face darkens. Ursula lifts her gaze to him, worried, and asks why he is so troubled. Every question pushes him straight to the source of pain. Deep down he knows he wants to help Aerith, but cannot make that choice. The trauma of that game will haunt him forever, and in a world where Xenon defeated Aerith, Leon, consumed by hatred, would have risen as the Demon King. This memory fuels his dark impulses. He imagines looking down on helpless Aerith, fantasizes about her despair, and about taking what belongs to Leon. As he struggles with these thoughts, Urza admits she does not understand his problems. Then she offers the simple wisdom of her people. If an ogre is worried, something should be smashed. She continues, laying out her straightforward approach to solving problems. Stop worrying, find the enemy and beat them senseless, think about other things later. And if you must worry, just find those who annoy you and crush them one by one. The brutal simplicity of her logic permeates the scene, and a tear rolls from his eye as he clenches his head, stunned by how clear her thought is compared to his tangled mind. Tension breaks and he bursts out laughing. He calls her a person of battle madness, considering her advice useless but refreshingly absurd maxim. He gently stroked Urza's head, a new determination shining in his eyes. He thought that sometimes it is not so bad to act like a fool and follow emotions without overthinking. Like Leon, there is no need, he decided, to worry about the game's scenario or any flags, and Urza, shining, simply and enthusiastically said yes. The decision grew from bitter disappointment. He did not know how his intervention would affect the heroine, but he knew for sure he was not helping out of kindness. He was trying to repay the scenario, give Leon a moment of triumph, and avoid the death flag over Arita's, but all this brought him only torment, and he no longer wanted to worry. With this new philosophy, wild energy ran through him, and taking Urza by the hand, he raced in front of the academy. He threw his fist into the air and laughed. He was a villain, so he would do as he pleased. Save those he wanted and crush anyone who annoyed him, and Urza, jumping alongside, thought it was a wonderfully simple plan. He declared it instantly. "Let's go," he ordered, pointing to their goal. Urza sharply raised her thumb up, confirming she was under his command. Without further words, they leapt from the roof of the academy, beginning a rapid descent. Their destination was a place far from the manicured school, lawns, a dark, ominous cave on the edge of town. As they approached the entrance, the deep darkness inside shuddered, and pairs of hungry, glowing eyes blinked. Standing before the enormous gates, Tsinan recognized this was the lair of the King of Corpses, and with a smile, he ordered to move forward. Urza willingly agreed, but their path was instantly blocked by a massive stone golem, so she raised a huge spiked mace, ready for battle. Wasting no time, she immediately put her weapon into action. With a fierce cry, she brought the mace down on the lizard-like monster, roaring that it must be destroyed to ashes, and shattered it to pieces. Her ferocity knew no bounds. She turned into a true whirlwind of destruction, breaking through the horde of creatures, and shouting that she would kill them all and grind them to dust. Xenon watched with a satisfied smile, noting her ruthlessness, and for the blunt weapon, her club proved brutally effective against these stone-skinned monsters. When the last monster fell, Urza rushed to him, shining with pride. "Master, I did it," she exclaimed. Xenon praised her for the excellent work. Now they stood by the stairs leading deeper underground. He assumed that Leon's squad had a good head start, but this was a dungeon with dozens of levels. He warned Urza that the enemies from here would only grow stronger, and she nodded understood. They began their descent into the dungeon's maw, and as they walked, Xenon pondered their situation. So far, they could not catch up with Aerith and the others, and that trio, he admitted, looked quite capable on their own. Barely stepping into the dungeon, Urza and he stumbled upon a battle already underway. A colossal stone bear, its fur ruffled and covered with sharp crystals, roared in fury, looming over a group of fighters. Urza was momentarily stunned, breath caught by its terrible power. He immediately understood how powerful this creature was. As the beast raged, Aerith rushed forward and shouted to comrades to smash it. Leon stood ready with a raised sword glowing with magic, and from the shadows, Xenon watched closely and silently signaled Leon to stop and not use the spell he had activated. Hesitation flickered across Leon's face for a moment as the order reached him. Urza breathes heavily, standing over the trembling remains of the fallen stone creature, and nearby Xenon calls her, a drop of sweat shining on his face. She turns to him with a bright, carefree smile and says it's nothing special. He, however, is unimpressed, remembering that since the gargoyle incident, she no longer fought alongside him and seems to have even forgotten basic techniques. He sternly orders Urza to retreat, saying he will take on the next battle himself. Her cheerful mood instantly disappears, eyes wide with shock, and she protests, shouting that she cannot allow her master to go into danger alone. Ignoring her pleas, he turns his gaze to a new threat emerging from the cave darkness, a gigantic, growling wolf-like beast. To her protest, he challenges Urza, asking if she trusts him, and coldly adds that if she cannot protect him, she is useless. The wolf with a crystalline back lunged forward, and he dodged to the side with a confident smile, seeing this as the perfect opportunity. The beast roared in despair and rose onto its hind legs. The monster swiped with its claws, but he effortlessly parries and dodges the blows. A predatory smile blooming on his face, he says he has already learned all its attack patterns. The beast crouches, gathering strength within itself. He immediately recognizes this move, the start of a charge before a lunge attack. With a roar, the monster lunges forward. Its huge jaws snap shut where he stood just a moment ago, but he has already twisted away completely unharmed. Leaping high into the air, he strikes down powerfully from above with his sword, shattering the crystalline growths on the monster's back, and the beast stumbles, its strength clearly diminished. With eyes narrowed in sharp concentration, he lets out a sharp cry and begins swinging his blade to deliver another devastating blow. He unleashes the final, devastating flurry of strikes. The blade moves faster than the eye can see. The crystal wolf's body is torn to pieces instantly. The crystalline body crumbles into a cloud of dark fragments. When the beast died, pure adoration shone on Earth's face. She turned to Xenon. "I was not worried. You are truly strong and worthy to become my lord." He tells her, although it was a mid-level monster, his skill, abilities, and game knowledge allowed him to defeat it alone without magic. But he warns the dungeon is still dangerous, so they must beware of encounters, as they can quickly stun them. With that, they move on and enter a cave littered with the remains of countless monsters, a harsh reminder of the dungeon's dangers, and Urza excitedly lifts a found item resembling a ring. Their path opens into a huge, shining crystal cave, the 8th floor, the bedroom of the Tyrant King. Inside, Urza stands ready in new, lighter combat gear, with a heavy spiked mace in her hands. Xenon warns her to be careful due to poor visibility, and she confidently replies that she will kill anyone they find. As they moved further, Urza suddenly noticed something in the distance and let out a piercing scream. She found it. Xenon's gaze instantly turned to the movement, his face becoming stern. Her scream sharply turned their gazes to the dark niche ahead, where a small group of figures huddled closely. The figures turn out to be 3 adventurers, who instantly turn and flee in terror. One of them exclaims in disbelief why there is a monster here, and Xenon, seeing their retreat, points forward and roars something at them. His order is ignored, so he activates the Shadowbind ability. Tentacles of darkness burst from the ground, fiercely wrapping around the fugitives and throwing them back onto the cave floor. He looms over the captured adventurer and demands to know why Baskerville is here. With icy determination, he forces him to answer. Why did he flee? And more importantly, where is Erit Centria? The traveler stammers, saying he was just descending into the dungeon for things and materials, did not expect such a powerful monster to appear, and admits he had no intention of leaving his companion but still left him. Xenon listens, clicks his tongue, irritated by this unexpected encounter. Tired of him, he orders Urza to move, and she willingly complies. The bound men panic, shouting for him to wait and free them from the magic, calling him a fool for abandoning them. Leaving them to fate, he and Urza go deeper into the cave, their paths strewn with the corpses of monsters they have already killed, and he thinks that if the adventurers are lucky, the spells binding them will disappear before some other monster finds them. He considers abandoning companions a despicable act. He was walking and suddenly froze, eyes wide with shock when he saw what lay in the chamber ahead. Before him loomed a colossal crystalline golma, giant of mithril, its massive form filling the cave. The colossal beast swings its clawed paw, but its blow dulls against the hexagonal energy shield radiated by a young nun in a habit. While she tensely holds back the attack, Xenon prepares a spelldark blade and notices that this creature is stronger than the others. She orders Urza to buy time and dodge, not to engage in direct combat. She herself rushes forward and shouts to distract the monster, and from the ground the nun raises her eyes in disbelief. She recognizes him, Baskerville. She imploringly pushes him to run, insists she cannot defeat this monster. Xenon, looking down irritably, says that in such a situation one should ask for help, not order to flee, muttering that she has not changed at all since that game. She sits on the cave floor, lost in thought. She believes that the spirit of the saint is to sacrifice oneself for the sake of others. She feels that giving her own life to help someone in need is the only meaning of her existence. She tugged Xenon by his clothes, breathing in short gasps, begging him to run away and insisting that he should not sacrifice himself for someone like her, asking him not to worry about either her or that girl, and begging him to leave them to die. Xenon just looked down at her when she weakly asked if he was okay. Her words about self-sacrifice upset him. Irritated that she was still speaking that way, he grabbed her by the chin and brought a small bottle to her lips, ordering her to drink after a minute of choking. She thanked him but immediately offered to give herself up to buy him time to escape. This gesture sparked a flash of irritation in Xenon, and then and there he decided he would have to discipline that foolish woman. He exploded with rage, his voice sharply cutting through the air. Who is this insolent woman? He hissed, demanding to know who would even listen to her. Arit just stared at him, shocked and silent. While a battle raged in the distance, Xenon swore he would make her say the words, "Help me," and truly save Arit. While the giant mithril roars behind his back, Xenon stands before Aerith, his voice tightening with despair. He warns that if things continue like this, they will all die, and demands to know why she does not allow him to die instead of her. He roars that her low self-esteem sounds as if her life is worthless, and Aerith only stammers, unable to answer anything. The root of her sacrificial nature lies in the past. In childhood, she and her mother were attacked by bandits. To protect her daughter, Aerith's mother created a powerful barrier, a spell that slowly consumed her own magical energy. Her powers were fading. She knew that if she continued, Aerith would die, but she could not force herself to break the barrier, even at the cost of her own life, and the guards surrounding them closed the circle, determined not to let anyone escape. Memory culminates in a field of graves, where young Aerith stands and cries over her mother. Having survived at the cost of her mother's life, she stopped valuing her own and lived only for others, and Xenon's voice echoes the same thought. He cries that she rejects chances for happiness, although he is the one who should sacrifice. At that moment, he yells at her to stop being a fool. He says that her devotion to God is just an excuse, a way to give up on herself because of her parents' death, accuses her of thinking she must die for the suffering to feel even a little better, and demands that she pull herself together. He continues, saying that since Leon is here, he is the one who should say such things. His words hit Aerith, and she noticeably flinched. In Zenon's mind, a true determination ripened. He will not tolerate a story where the heroine dies for the sake of others. Since he transformed, he will not allow the heroine to be unhappy. For her sake, he will destroy every tragic ending, even if he has to become a villain or a hero. He grabbed her, his eyes burning with fierce determination. He says that her past life was in vain, lived only for others, and forbids her even to imagine with pride that someone so worthless could ever make another person happy. The giant mithril, holding Erth captive, mocks her, asks what she wants to do, what she likes, if she has any hobbies, and throws in that if she does not want to die, she should behave like the weakling she is and beg for help. Tears rolled down her face as she recalled the past. Having survived at the cost of her mother's life, she desperately did not know where to seek salvation now. At that moment, Zenon grabs her, his face very close. He says that asking for help is a privilege of the weak, and since she is weaker than him, he demands that she bow her head quickly and beg. Overwhelmed with emotions, she folds her hands as if in prayer, tears still flowing, and finally she whispers her request, "Please help me." His reaction is theatrical admiration. Zenon strikes a pose and exclaims that beautiful women are so pathetic when they cry, and because of that, one wants to protect them. Aerith, stunned, calls him shameless. He brushes off her word, turns away with a triumphant smile, and suddenly a strange vision of confetti and cherubs appears around, leaving Aerith with a premonition of trouble. He refocuses on the fight and orders Aerith to drink the potion to restore magic, says that together they will defeat this giant monster, and that he needs her help. Aerith agrees but points to the terrible power of the creature that wounded everyone else without a scratch, and Zenon only smiles and says he has a plan against cowards who would abandon a woman and run away. He glanced at the battle Urza fights with all her might, but even her powerful demonic mace barely harms that crystalline creature. The giant mithril stands unshakably. Zenon mentally feels the same incredible hardness he remembers from the game. This only confirms his suspicion that this is not an ordinary monster. Everyone knows the idea of a safe dungeon is a lie. Surprises are always possible. In any dungeon, no matter how familiar it seems, there is always a 0-1 chance of encountering a dangerous creature, a monster, whose strength far exceeds the strength of the dungeon itself. These monsters often have unique and deadly skills from their first appearance. Zenon, battered and bloody, returns to Aerith and orders her to heal the half-human Urza, and when he says he will start casting a spell, Aerith interrupts him, her face filled with despair. She insists that it is useless. Magic does not work on that monster. Despite her protests, Zenon smiled contemptuously, clearly making it clear that he knew well what kind of creature it was. He knew that the body of that dangerous monster they had encountered was covered with mithril ore. He explained that it was precisely because of Mithril's high magical resistance that magical attacks did not affect her. With a fierce expression, he ordered her to be silent and simply follow his commands. Meanwhile, another member of their group knelt. A woman dressed as a healer directed her power. A glowing circle of runes flared around her, and she began to sequentially cast enhancement spells: X-Heal, Strength Up, Guard Up, Stamina Charge, and Rabbit Foot. The effect was immediate. In their squad, the elven warrior felt a sudden surge of vitality. The wound on her leg instantly vanished in a flash of light, and she exclaimed with renewed energy that she was ready to continue the fight. Zenon reproached the healer. "Your job is to heal and support, not to stand in the front line and be a shield for others. Why do you refuse to use your own powers?" She looked back at him. Her determination did not waver. Despite his words, she simply did not want to see anyone else suffer. He snorted with contempt and cut in, saying that if someone got injured, her job was to heal them, and he emphasized once again that the healer's place was in the rear to cover the fighters on the front line. Having decided this, he again focused on the mithril giant, stepped into the center of a large, intricate magical circle, and took advantage of the creature's bad temper and weak defense, a perfect target for the first kill bonus. But the magic he wanted to use did not work under usual conditions. A memory surfaced of a scholar explaining the unique system of this world. It was not built on levels, but on a mastery model. To use new magic, one first had to acquire a grimoire, learn the spells, and then train mastery to master the skills. But the scholar, grimoire in hand, revealed an important loophole. It was possible to learn even the most powerful spells regardless of mastery level, and he emphasized without the necessary skill points, the spells simply would not work. He smiles, electric energy crackling around his hands. He admits that this system is very capricious, but that is exactly why it fascinates him. He states that there are two ways to defeat the mithril giant. The first way, he says, is a simple frontal assault. The group will have to constantly dodge the creature's attacks and gradually wear down its enormous endurance. A battle of attrition that many others clearly lost their bodies now litter the battlefield around the Colossus. The second method is magic. It reveals the truth. The belief that magic negates mithril turns out to be a deception. In reality, if a creature takes enough magical damage, its mithril armor crumbles, exposing beneath it only a simple golem. He obtained this key information from a strategy guide, a detail that misled many other players. To exploit this weakness, he takes out a special paid item, a bottle of doping, then sharply clenches his fist, breaks the vial, and absorbs its contents. The power of the bottle surged over him, his skills temporarily soared, a complex magical circle appeared under his feet, and the healer and warrior watched with wide-open eyes in amazement. He directs this newfound power, gathering it into his open palm. A vortex of pure dark energy swirls, pulsating with incredible force and reaching its deadliest peak. When the whirlwind becomes unstable, he jumps into the air, shouts a warning to the elven warrior, Urza, back, and declares that in his current state he can now wield the most powerful dark magic. He releases a spell in the air. Above the giant mithril appears a huge, complex magical circle. He proudly proclaims that this magical abyss gate is a power commanded only by him and the Demon King. The gates of the abyss open, engulfing the colossal golem with a blinding sphere of light, pierced by twisting tentacles of dark energy, the creature trapped, its silent body contorted as if frozen on a silent screen. Under the incredible pressure of the spell, the crystal armor of the giant mithril suddenly cracks and crumbles into pieces. Fragments of its body fly off, exposing a dark mechanical frame from inside, and it begins to completely disintegrate. Its crystal form could not withstand the power of the abyss, and the massive golem shattered, its body scattered into countless fragments under the stunning force of the spell. When the last remnants of the monster disappeared, the elven warrior joyfully exclaimed that he did it, and calling him her master, rushed into his embrace with tenderness, while Xenon, pale and exhausted, silently confirmed that the conquest was complete. She, who was not a healer, looked at them and got lost in thought, recalling her mother's words, that someday she would meet her destined one and must give him everything. But reverie was torn from her dreams by Xenon's cry of pain. He groaned that his whole body ached from the backlash of that doping drug. The one who was not a healer approached and sharply grabbed him by the ears, scolding him that it was his own fault for such carelessness. Xenon exclaimed, asking if she said something. She stammered, whispered no, and turned away, burning with shame. Skipping Eret's words turned out to be a fatal mistake. This will become clear a little later. From this, a new path began. A huge crystalline cave stretches into the darkness, its floor strewn with fragments of a great battle-broken weapons and abandoned armor lying like silent witnesses of a brutal clash. The dungeon and countermetal of conquest, a special item received for collected proof of victory. He thoughtfully considers that, like in a game, there must be some water that will exchange it for something truly valuable, and wonders if this world operates by the same laws. Having made a decision, he turns back to exit the cave, and companions follow closely behind an elven warrior and the one who does not heal. He asks if they are ready to return. Forward, their path was blocked by a swirling whirlwind. Two students found themselves trapped, screaming in horror, calling the surname Xenon Baskerville. He could not desperately beg him to release them. Xenon, however, turns away with a contemptuous sound, irritated by the persistence, and thinks to leave them to fate. The non-healer steps forward, calls him by name and asks if he just uttered his own name in a curse, reminding that she bought him for service and whether he is worth that price if he will not even help. He turns to her with a threatening look. Although he admits that he abandoned his squadmates, he insists that as an academy teacher his job is to punish students, and his personal beliefs give no reason to do more for them than necessary. She decisively counters his arguments, insists that he should not dirty his hands for those like them, and begs him not to ruin his reputation even more. He stops, catching every word she says, and horribly realizes, if it becomes known that he fed monsters with classmates, he will be expelled from the entire academy, and the friends he managed to find may turn away. With a simple, sharp snap of his fingers, the mighty whirlwind instantly dissipated. Two students sharply fell to the ground, barely catching their breath. Xenon turned to the stunned woman, who was not a healer, with a cruel smile, and mockingly said that as a saint she should not cause him such unnecessary grief. Her eyes widened in shock. She stammered, "Me." Meanwhile, somewhere else, a young horned girl, Urza, dressed in new battle gear, a hood, a Xenon arm or striped back, which she accepts, blushing. Full of energy, she exclaims that she is bored and ready to fight several enemies. The nun, however, is clearly confused by the recent turn of events and hesitantly stammers in her words, while Xenon calmly waves his hand, brushing off her worries. Urza stands nearby and looks up at her. Then she gathers her resolve and speaks confidently. She explains that she does not intend to save the other students. Xenon is her patron, and it is him she intends to protect. It is her honor, she insists. While she speaks, the monster strikes Urza and throws her aside. The statement hung in the air, and a tense silence fell between them in the cave. Meanwhile, Urza is already in full swing, cheerfully collecting coins and other loot, while monsters are mercilessly being slaughtered around. Xenon broke the silence, noticed the nun's sudden boldness, and with a smile asked when she appointed herself guardian, then turned away and called Urza to return. She immediately obeys and happily runs back to him in the middle of the night. She proudly shows her bag, now overflowing with sparkling crystals, and insists that her master see all the things she has gathered. He praises her, gently stroking her head for a job well done. Urza beams with happiness, and the nun watches this tender interaction with surprise. After completing the task, Xenon's voice echoed from the stone stairs leading out of the dungeon and asked if it was time to go home. He leads his companions, the nun and the warrior Urza, out of the stone interior of the dungeon. As they emerge into the light, Urza, already in school uniform, peeks around the corner and watches them closely. As they walked, the nun suddenly pressed against his back. He froze completely from this unexpected, close touch. The sudden sensation rushed through him, and his face twisted in pure shock. She blushed. He, stammering, asked her to step back a little, complaining that her breasts were pressing on his hand. She calmly replies that as a healer it is problematic for her to be without protection, so keeping a distance is unreasonable. He walks ahead of the stone stairs and inside agrees with this, but her closeness overwhelms him and seems almost sinful, so he reminds himself that he never allowed her to do everything as she pleased. She reminds him that he himself allowed her to live as she pleased, and now she lives that way, insisting that he answer for his words. He is desperate, does not understand how it all happened, blames himself, and thinks that this scene should have taken place between the hero Leon and the sage Arit, not him, because he mistakenly took the role of the hero. Changing the subject, she directly asks about him. She recalls the last words of Arita's mother, said before death how she would have given everything to her destined companion, who was to become the hero's support. The nun says that Xenon behaves exactly as that woman would describe the hero. This revelation horrifies him. He screams inside for her to stop. He insists that he cannot possibly be a hero. He wonders what last will Arita's mother could have left. He is convinced that this is a colossal misunderstanding. She calmly continues, if he is not a hero now, maybe he will become one. She says that whether he will be a hero or a villain entirely depends on his will, and then makes a stunning statement: he is destined to bring the world to ruin. Her words leave him completely stunned. He grabbed his head and racks his brains because he is sure he never had any life consultation with some unknown fortune teller. You push away the hand, but she, not a healer, just raised her eyes to him, and a light blush colored her cheeks. His eyes bulged in shock. She did not retreat, instead firmly clinging to his leg with unexpected strength. Her face softened with quiet devotion. She said that if he is a hero, then she will become his guardian angel, swore to give him her whole life, to be by his side as his wife in sickness and in health, in sorrow and in joy, unchangingly, because she was the one he was destined to be with. He looked back, completely confused. He realized that such a dialogue had never appeared in the game. She pressed against his chest, and Urza clung to him from the other side. He tried to pull himself together, repeating to himself, calm down and do not focus on these feelings. He could not believe such an unexpected turn of events. The nun Urza, looking at him with adoration, said she was tired, and Xenon, sighing, offered to carry her. Step by step they advanced through the spacious dungeon. Ursa comfortably settled on his shoulders, and nearby Arit barely walked, so the nun took her hand and quietly calmed her, saying she was safe. The nun's hand stretched out, pointing to the dazzling light at the end of the long stone corridor. She turned to Xenon and said they had cleared another dungeon. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the exit. At that moment the nun pressed close to him, her stomach growled, and she quietly whispered that she was hungry. He sighed quietly, burdened by two companions who now clung to him. Sitting on the throne of defeated enemies, he recalls his path. The idea of following a ready-made script only provokes laughter. He refuses to be easy prey, will not let the world fall, and resolutely forges his way forward. His thoughts turn to his comrades. Urza, who finally found friends, passes through the dungeon with new confidence, a clear sign of her growing up. He gained not only her new powerful allies joined him, three great heroines, among them the devoted one who does not heal, the wise Arit, and the formidable Najsa. With these thoughts, the group finally exits the dungeon, and as soon as they step outside, the bright light of dawn greets them, and Xenon realizes it is already morning. Before them stood the majestic, exquisite gates of the academy, as if welcoming their return to civilization.